I think you're about to have your mind blown.
Unexplained disappearance of Dorothy Arnold, the famous case of D.B. Cooper.
The most missingest man in America. The mysterious disappearance of the Sodder children.
Someone took those kids.
I guess that's what we'll have to find out.
This week on BuzzFeed Unsolved, we discussed the famous case of D.B. Cooper, a case that the FBI has referred to as one of the great unsolved mysteries in FBI history. It's also considered one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in U.S. history. It's a favorite of mine.
Yeah, I've heard of this one a little bit, just a little bit.
Oh, you haven't heard it like I'm about to tell it.
Oh boy.
Okay, let's
Strap
get
in.
Let's strap in, baby. Let's get into it. On Wednesday, November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, a man going by the name Dan Cooper bought a $20 one-way ticket on Northwest Orient Airlines with cash for flight number 305 from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. Cooper was described as being in his mid-40s and wearing a business suit, a black rain-type overcoat, brown shoes, a white shirt, and black tie. He carried a dark briefcase and a 4-inch by 12-inch by 14-inch paper bag. Before the plane took off, Cooper, seated in seat 18C, ordered a bourbon and soda.
He seems like a cool dude.
I don't think he even ordered the bourbon and soda to calm his nerves. I think he
he's
just
probably
did it
just like,
he's a
bourbon
badass.
soda. Now, I'm D.B. Cooper. I'm a mystery man. Give me a bourbon. That's a big gulp.
After the plane had taken off, a little after 3 p.m., Cooper handed the stewardess a note. At first, she just put it in her pocket without looking at it. But then Cooper said, quote, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb," end quote. What's so funny about that? He has a bomb.
I think it's funny that he passed her a note to be discreet about it. Like, hey, keep this on the down low. And then she was just like, thanks, and walked away. And he was like, hey, you might want to read that because I've got a bomb. God damn it. Yeah, I got a bomb, everybody.
Cooper told her the bomb was in his briefcase and asked her to sit next to him. He opened his briefcase to show red-colored sticks surrounded by an array of wires. After that, Cooper asked the stewardess to write down what he was saying and take it to the captain. Quote, "I want $200,000 by 5 p.m. in cash. Put in a knapsack. I want 2 back parachutes and 2 front parachutes. When we land, I want a fuel truck ready to refuel. No funny stuff, or I'll do the job."
No funny stuff.
I also like how he says, "do the job."
I'll do the job.
Like that's his threat, which actually to me,
badass.
he's not a dime store criminal. Let's just say that. No. I'm on board with the Coop train.
Me too. I'm a fan of this guy.
You a big Coop head?
I'm a Coop head.
One odd detail was that Cooper asked for the $200,000 to be exclusively in $20 bills. The flight landed in Seattle, and Cooper exchanged the 36 passengers on the plane for the money and the parachutes he had requested. Cooper kept some crew members on the plane and had the plane take off for Mexico City, requesting that the plane remain below 10,000 feet. During the second half of the flight, Cooper put on a pair of dark wraparound sunglasses with dark rims that would later become part of the sketch that would become famous for anybody familiar with the case.
Yeah, I'm just imagining like a camera just pushing in on him as he's like,
If we were in today's age, this guy would definitely have headphones in playing Spotify playlists of epic soundtracks.
he'd have one of those shitty hoverboards.
Not an actual hoverboard, but
Yeah, he'd be like, or I'll do the job. And he'd take out his wheels, put them down, start moving up and down the aisle. Knapsack, or I'll do the job.
A little after 8 p.m., when the plane was somewhere between Seattle and Reno, Nevada, Cooper jumped out of the rear doors of the Boeing 727 with 2 of the parachutes and the money, never to be seen again. One thing worth noting is that Cooper took off his black JCPenney clip-on tie before jumping, a piece of evidence that the FBI was able to procure a DNA sample from.
You think James Bond ever wore a clip-on bow tie?
Yeah, I guess. Wow, that does kind of...
That's kind of takes the wind out of my sails a
maybe
little
if he like knew he had to do it quick, and that was
Still,
like
but
an efficiency thing.
If he was like, I'm gonna put my sunglasses on, it'll look cool. If he was like, clink.
With the DNA sample from the tie, let's jump into the investigation launched to identify the man who called himself Dan Cooper. The case was called Norjack, standing for Northwest Hijacking, and would last decades. The plane was intensely searched for evidence. Desperate to find Cooper's identity, there was extra interest in $20 bills, because the FBI had released the serial numbers of the bills stolen by Cooper. Remarkably, in 1980, 9 years after Cooper's escape, a young boy found a rotting package filled with $20 bills that matched the ransom money serial numbers. There was $5,800 in all. The boy found the bills on a beach at Tina Bar while making a campfire with his father. People theorized that when Cooper jumped out, the money possibly fell into the Washougal River before eventually making its way to Tina Bar. That's basically all they've theorized.
I'm just imagining him just jumping out and immediately just losing grip of all the bags. Just a man plummeting to earth with a bunch of money flying around him and like, ah!
Though, this discovery would ultimately lead to nothing, as the FBI scoured the surrounding beaches, finding nothing else. In the year that followed the hijacking, several letters were sent to the FBI. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and Seattle Times, either confessing to the crime, eulogizing a recently deceased D.B. Cooper, or claiming to be his brother. In fact, in November 1972, two men, Donald Sylvester Murphy and William John Lewis, were taken into federal custody on charges of extortion for impersonating Cooper and selling his tell-all story to a tabloid.
It seems like a bad idea to make your get-rich-quick scheme to be to impersonate a criminal.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be like, haha, hey, it's me, the Zodiac Killer. I'll tell you a story. What? Oh.
Leads were tracked all over the country, and more than 800 suspects were considered over the first 5 years of the investigation. All but 24 suspects were eliminated from consideration. One peculiar fact is that the initials DB have no actual relevance to the case, and the FBI isn't sure where they came from. It was reportedly a mistake from a wire service that caused him to be called DB Cooper instead of Dan Cooper, which is how he presented himself when buying the plane ticket.
DB sounds cooler.
It does.
Dan just sounds like your neighbor who's like asking to borrow a lawnmower.
The physical description of Cooper is thought to be very accurate. Two flight attendants spent hours with him on the plane and were interviewed separately the night the hijacking occurred. They gave nearly identical descriptions of Cooper, saying that he was 5'10" to 6 feet, 170 to 180 pounds, in his mid-40s, and brown eyes. People who interacted with him on the ground gave similar descriptions. His voice was described as low, no particular accent, but spoke with an intelligent vocabulary.
I would like some bourbon and some money, or I will do the job.
Sounds like a terrifying version of Siri.
It's me, Dan.
The charge against Cooper was originally air piracy, but that had a 5-year statute of limitations. And as time went on, with no suspects being found guilty, a grand jury later indicted Cooper for violating the Hobbs Act. The Hobbs Act is a federal statute designed to prevent extortion and has no statute of limitations, meaning if Cooper was found tomorrow, he could be charged even though the FBI investigation has since been called off. Before we jump into suspects, I'd like to point out that the pilot told officials that he himself chose the route the plane took, not Cooper. Cooper only requested his end destination of Mexico City, a decision that is a bit puzzling when you consider the fact that Cooper knew he intended to jump out of a plane. This seemingly eliminates the possibility of Cooper having an accomplice, as there was no coordination about the route from Cooper, and therefore no coordinated drop point.
This is what always interested me about this case. It's because it seems so meticulously planned up until he jumps.
Maybe he's one of those people that like goes out to do things, like I'm kind of like this too, where I'll go out and I'm like, I'll figure it out in the moment.
Or he was confident and he nailed it.
With that, let's jump into the suspects. The first suspect is Richard Floyd McCoy, who is the favorite suspect of former FBI agent Russell Kalam and former federal probation officer Bernie Rhodes. The two men even wrote a book about the case. In April 1972, 5 months after Cooper's escape, the FBI arrested Richard Floyd McCoy for hijacking an airplane. When examined, the McCoy heist is definitely similar to the Cooper heist. Like Cooper, McCoy hijacked a plane and parachuted off of it. McCoy jumped out the back rear staircase of a Boeing 727, the same plane Cooper jumped out of, using the same method. Also like Cooper, McCoy requested 4 parachutes and was calm during the heist. Reportedly, both of the men passed notes to the flight attendants claiming a bomb was on board, a detail that becomes more compelling when you learn that both Cooper and McCoy's notes reportedly contained the phrase, "no funny stuff." Another suspicious coincidence is the fact that both crimes reportedly occurred while Brigham Young University, where McCoy was a student, was on break.
He was a student?
In this theory, yes.
I was thinking about it in like a cold, hard criminal way. I wasn't thinking like, spring break! That sounds kind of fun.
Do you think that's what he yelled when he jumped out the plane? Spring break! He just falls out to his death.
Spring break!
Perhaps the most riveting detail is that according to Kalam and Rhodes, members of McCoy's family identified an object left on the plane by Cooper, an object that was never publicly identified. Some parts of the internet seem to believe that this object was a Brigham Young University medallion with McCoy's initials on it, but this seems to stem from the Wikipedia page on the case, which makes this most likely complete horseshit. I mean, the thing is, if that's the case closed.
Yeah.
Brigham Young University medallion with his initials on it. I mean,
but it's not definitive. It's not.
They just said unidentified object, which is probably like a stick of gum or some stupid shit like that.
Oh, he chewed.
He chewed Wrigley's.
For sure. Yeah.
He chewed Wrigley's.
Oh, he was a big juicy fruit man.
Regardless if McCoy is Cooper or not, the FBI eventually ruled out McCoy as a suspect for the Cooper case, mainly because he didn't match the descriptions of Cooper given by the flight attendants, though Kalam and Rhodes listed the two men as looking similar. Additionally, according to FBI archives, McCoy was home with his family for Thanksgiving dinner in Utah the day after the hijacking. Unlike Cooper, McCoy was actually caught after his heist and sentenced to 45 years in prison. McCoy would actually escape from prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, and later die in a gunfight with FBI agents in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I just love how that story has so many like,
I know.
oh, he's out.
Like,
he's not
yeah.
out. He's out.
Huh?
Shot to death.
Oh.
That was a roller coaster of emotions right there. The second suspect is Dwayne Weber, who claimed to be D.B. Cooper on his deathbed. His wife, Jo, claims that in the hour of his death, Dwayne pulled her close and said, quote, "I have a secret to tell you. I'm Dan Cooper."
I was trying to take a drink, and I just imagined.
Closer. I have a secret to tell you. I'm the phantom of the sky.
I bet she did not see that one coming.
No, she's probably going to be like,
did he cheat on me?
Exactly. Did you cheat on me?
I'm a man of myth.
This revelation led to Jo revisiting what should have been clear clues. According to Jo, Dwayne had nightmares where he'd sleep talk about, quote, leaving fingerprints on a plane. He also had a knee ailment that he claimed he got jumping out of a plane. Dwayne's handwriting was reportedly found in the margins of a library book on D.B. Cooper. Jo also claims Dwayne took her to the place where the money was eventually found on Tina Bar Beach. That's interesting. If that's true, that is interesting.
Wait, what did he write in the margins? This was me.
Cool guy. Coolest guy in history. Nice sunglasses. Wow. Bourbon's great. And finally, Jo claims that Dwayne had an old Northwest airline ticket for no apparent reason. 29 years after he left the case, here is a quote from former lead FBI agent Ralph Himmelsbach on Dwayne Weber. Quote, "He does fit the physical description. He does have the criminal background that I have always felt was associated with the case." End quote. Himmelsbach also believed that Jo Weber's story may have credibility, but ultimately did not believe it was him. She may be telling the truth,
Sounds pretty credible. I don't believe her.
but she's probably lying.
Yeah.
The third and final suspect is Kenneth Christensen, the favorite suspect of the author Jeffrey Gray. The theory began when Lyle Christensen, the brother of Kenneth Christensen, saw an episode of Unsolved Mysteries and became convinced that his brother was D.B. Cooper. Lyle also cites a deathbed confession from his now late brother Kenneth. Kenneth reportedly said, quote, "There is something you should know, but I cannot tell you." End quote.
And then he died?
And then he died. Talk about a guy who appreciates a cliffhanger.
Yeah, that's great.
I could, you know what? Touche, Kenneth. Kenneth was a flight purser for Northwest Orient Airlines, the same airline that Cooper hijacked, which would support online suspicion that it was an inside job. Kenneth also loved bourbon and bought a house shortly after the crime, though it was reportedly unassuming. Perhaps the most enthralling part of Gray's theory is the fact that when he showed a picture of Kenneth to a flight attendant who interacted with Cooper, she agreed that of all the suspects she had seen, Kenneth was the closest. Though, she also said, quote, "I can't say yay," end quote. Bizarrely, the FBI debunked Kenneth on the basis that he didn't match the description. So once again, the FBI coming in hot with some weird I don't know. I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
you're cool, FBI. I'm just saying.
You don't want to make enemies of the deep state.
I don't. Especially now with never mind.
Yeah.
Another reason the FBI discredits Kenneth as a suspect is because Kenneth was a paratrooper just after World War II, a detail that is damning according to the FBI, who believes that Cooper was not a skilled jumper.
Maybe he was masquerading as an unskilled jumper.
That's an interesting suspicion, and perhaps, well, let's get into the next section. And
Greatest way to fool someone is to act a fool yourself.
Is that
Julius Caesar,
no,
Shakespeare.
No. No.
That's not.
No, I didn't think so.
I thought you'd fall into that one.
No. Which brings us to our next suspect, or rather theory, from Special Agent Larry Carr, that D.B. Cooper did not survive the fall. Agent Carr took over the D.B. Cooper case in 2007. Here's a quote from him on the matter. Quote, "We originally thought Cooper was an experienced jumper, perhaps even a paratrooper. We concluded after a few years this was simply not true." End quote. Here's some details that support that narrative. Cooper jumped carrying 2 parachutes. However, only one of them was a functioning chute. The other was a training chute that was sewn shut. Furthermore, the chute that was functional was a military chute that was not steerable. He's kind of starting to sound like an idiot.
A little bit.
The whole time he's like, yeah, bourbon soda. Bomb. Here's your note. I'm a cool guy. Sunglasses. Jumps out the plane. Splat.
It's not a splat. I think a pine tree just. He was just like, no.
Kill me.
Little squirrel runs up to him.
Get out of here!
Here's some more details from Agent Carr. Quote, "No experienced parachutist would have jumped in the pitch black night, in the rain, with a 200-mile-an-hour wind in his face, wearing loafers and a trench coat." End quote. Other reasons he possibly died in the fall include him jumping into a wooded area at night, and there was no visibility of the ground at the time that he jumped, as there was a cloud cover at 5,000 feet.
So this guy's a dum-dum.
He's a dum-dum.
Yeah.
He's a big dum-dum. Big dum-dum floating in the sky with his stupid trench coat blowing in the wind.
Loafers.
Obviously, this theory loses a bit of credence due to the fact that his body or chute were never found. The last theory we will discuss comes from a group of amateur scientists that refer to themselves as citizen sleuths.
That's frankly kind of what you are.
Yeah, and that's why I like this theory.
Okay, well, let's see what your friends have to say.
I got you guys, don't worry. He's gonna be floored. Citizen sleuths employed the use of an electron microscope to discover north of 100,000 particles on D.B. Cooper's tie. Among these particles, they discovered cerium, strontium sulfide, and pure titanium. According to lead citizen sleuths researcher Tom Kay, quote, "These are what they call rare earth elements. They're used in very narrow fields for very specific things," end quote. Kay stated that although these elements were rare during 1971, one place they were being utilized was at Boeing, where they were developing an advanced supersonic transport plane. Kay and the citizen sleuths posit that Cooper may have been a Boeing employee, explaining the rare materials found on his tie. Quote, "The tie went with him into these manufacturing environments, for sure. So he was not one of the people running these manufacturing machines. He was either an engineer or a manager in one of the plants," end quote.
I feel like if you got a job at Boeing, just hang in there.
Why does he
Get a nice 401k, retire. Why you gotta go jumping out of planes?
Because that's not how DB does it, baby. He likes bourbon, he likes adventure, and he likes notes.
And flying through the sky, screaming with a pair of loafers on.
Kay believes the key to identifying Cooper rests within the memory of perhaps one person in the Pacific Northwest who was involved in the aerospace industry at the time. If that person is you, all information can be relayed to the Citizen Sleuths via the contact tab on their website, citizensleuths.com. The FBI called their search for D.B. Cooper one of the longest and most exhaustive investigations in its history. As of 2011, the FBI case file measured 40 feet long and covered more than 1,000 suspects. So what we presented here is only the tip of the iceberg. The case was open for 45 years before the FBI finally closed it in 2016, though they are still willing to listen to possible leads. What do you think happened?
I'm gonna go Occam's razor on this one and just assume that he rocketed into the ground. A little juxtaposition of him being on the plane being like, I'll have a bourbon. And then 2 hours later being like, "Ah!"
After all these years, people are still transfixed on the identity of the cunning crook known as D.B. Cooper. But for now, and perhaps forever, the case of D.B. Cooper will remain unsolved. What if the trench coat was like Batman, where it was like a flight-activated suit that allows him to fly around like a flying squirrel?
In my mind, though, I don't imagine him being like, oh, here comes the tree line. I imagine him being like, oh, I can't see through the clouds. Oh, now I can. It's just like the Wile E. Coyote.
Plume of smoke.
Yeah.
This week on BuzzFeed Unsolved, we cover the mysterious disappearance of the Sodder children. You look enthralled. You look really excited.
I can't wait.
I think you're about to have your mind blown.
We'll see.
Okay, cool. Let's get into it.
The year was 1945, on the night before Christmas in Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jenny Sodder, along with 9 of their children, were asleep when a fire started in the house at around 1 a.m. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children escaped: Sylvia, Marion, John, and George Jr. The children that remained in the house were Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, and the 5 of them shared 2 bedrooms between them, both rooms upstairs. George broke back into the house to save the rest of the children, but the staircase was on fire. When he went outside to retrieve his ladder, it was missing from its normal spot, and both of his coal trucks, which he wanted to use to park outside and climb on top of, were strangely not starting.
Don't park your coal truck by a fire. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine there was coal in the truck at
Oh,
the time.
okay.
I'm sure it was emptied of coal.
Well, I don't know. It's a coal truck.
He just climbs on top of a pile of coal.
It's all just covered in flammable coal, jumping into a house. Bad idea.
Marion, one of the children who escaped the fire, ran to the neighbor's house to call the fire department, but the operator didn't respond, and when a different neighbor attempted to call, she also got no response from the operator. That same neighbor actually drove to town and found the fire chief, F.J. Morris, in person. But even though the fire department was only located 2.5 miles away from the home, the firefighters bizarrely didn't reach the Sodder house until 8 a.m., 7 hours after the fire began. And by the time they arrived, the house was literally ash.
Time to reevaluate your staff there.
You really see where your tax money's going there.
That's not like, oh boy, we really dropped the ball on that one. That's like firefighters from Florida could have driven up there in time.
In their defense, it was Christmas Eve.
Oh, it's fine if people die
So
on
like
Christmas
they
Eve.
tried calling. I'm not saying I'm condoning them for being 7 hours late to a fire that was 2.5 miles away.
It's just not great.
In fact, I'm pretty sure I could run that in probably about an hour at least.
I could spit the fire out
I
in
could
that
probably
time.
chug a
I
beer
could
and
just
run
spit on the fire.
Authorities scavenged the ashes of the fire looking for the remains of the 5 missing Sodder children, but nothing was found, and they were presumed dead due to the fire. The fire chief, F.J. Morris, suggested that the fire may have been so hot that it completely cremated the children's bodies, including their bones. While that theory sounds reasonable, it is not entirely accurate, because when flesh is burned away, bones are still typically left behind, likely in fragmented form. Additionally, there was no smell of burning flesh reported during or after the fire. The cause of the fire was deemed to be bad wiring in the house, and in the week after, the Fayetteville Coroner's Office issued death certificates for the 5 Sodder children. The basement of the house still remained, and George would later use a bulldozer to cover it up with 5 feet of dirt to create a memorial to his children. Soon after the fire, George and Jenny began to suspect their children were not dead, but instead kidnapped, believing the fire was deliberately set as a diversion and not the result of faulty wiring. In fact, George had actually had the wiring in his house checked earlier that fall by the power company, which had deemed the wiring in safe working order.
Who said the wiring was faulty?
Somebody in the coroner's office. You'll see why they may have done this later, but anyways.
But before we dig into the theory that the children were kidnapped, let's discuss George's personal history to provide some context.
Ooh.
George Sodder had immigrated from Italy, and Fayetteville, where the Sodders lived, had a small but engaged Italian immigrant community, a community that George was very vocal in, especially about his disdain for Mussolini, sparking a few heated debates in the community. George also reportedly never revealed why he left Italy, leading some to speculate that he may have been involved in some shady business in Italy. Many believe that either of these reasons may have led to the kidnapping of George's children. Let's examine some curious occurrences that support a possible kidnapping. In the fall, just before the house fire, a life insurance salesman came to the house, and when he saw that his sale wasn't going to be successful, he became infuriated, yelling at George, quote, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed. You're going to be paid for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini," end quote.
Right, I think we've solved it. All right, well, it's been fun. See you later. I will set this house on fire, and your children are going to die. Huh. Who could it be? Who could have done this?
Seems a little on the nose for me. He just listed every single aspect of the case in nice, easy, laid out fashion.
House on fire. Kids are gonna go up and yeah.
It was like the third act of a student film when they had to wrap everything up in exposition and dialogue.
And this, oh shit, it's due tomorrow.
In the days leading up to the fire, 2 of the surviving Sodder sons witnessed a man watching the younger Sodder children come home from school on Highway 21. Another suspicious occurrence happened that night. On the night of the fire at around 12:30 a.m., the phone rang, and Jenny got out of bed to answer. This would result in an important observation. Jenny noticed the lights were still on downstairs. As she started to fall back asleep, she heard a loud bang on the roof, followed by the sound of something rolling. And an hour later, she woke to the smell of smoke entering her room downstairs. The detail that is interesting is the fact that the lights were still on. If the fire had been caused by faulty wiring, as had been suggested, then that meant there wouldn't have been power to the house, meaning that the lights shouldn't have been working. But Jenny saw that they were on about an hour before the smoke. And later, the Sodders would claim that they saw the lights on while the fire was occurring as well. Additionally, a witness to the fire claimed that they saw a man removing a block and tackle typically used for removing engines from cars, perhaps explaining why both of George's trucks weren't working that night.
Did they, as their post-mortem, did they look in the cars to see if there were engines in them? No.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think he removed the engines completely because it's not like he could waddle away with really heavy engines. I think maybe he just tampered with it, just pull a couple wires here and there.
Okay.
This is all a possibility.
It sure is.
I'm just presenting the case here, all right?
After the fire, when the family visited the memorial George had set up, Sylvia found a hard rubber object in the yard, an object that Jenny believed may have caused the loud bang that woke her that night. But even more interesting was the fact that after further inspection from George, he believed the object was a napalm pineapple bomb, similar to those used in the war at the time.
I mean, it sounds like someone set the house on fire.
Yeah, it clearly does. I think we have enough here to say,
Yeah.
someone probably set the house on fire. Probably wasn't faulty wiring.
With all these strange occurrences and not believing that the fire could have burned her children's bones to ash, Jenny began to experiment by burning different types of animal bones, all of which left remains. She spoke to a crematorium employee who told her that in cremation, bones were left behind even after bodies burned at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours, and the Sodder home only burned for about 45 minutes. Also noteworthy is the fact that remains of household appliances were found in the rubble, meaning not everything was ash.
So clearly, there should have been bones left.
Should have been bones.
There have also been reported sightings of the children. One occurred that night while the fire was still burning. A woman claimed to see the children in a car that drove by while the fire was still raging. 50 miles west of Fayetteville, a woman who operated a tourist stop told police that she saw the children the morning after the fire. Quote, "I served them breakfast. There was a car with Florida license plates at the tourist court too." End quote.
Nice of her.
Yeah. At home.
Giving them breakfast.
Yeah, I mean, she's just,
It's nice to have breakfast.
okay, well, I agree. Breakfast is nice. I enjoy bacon.
Agree to agree.
What are we doing here?
At a hotel in nearby Charleston, a woman reported seeing 4 of the 5 children about a week after the fire. Here's her statement to the police. Quote, "The children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of Italian extraction. I do not remember the exact date. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the man appeared hostile and refused to allow me to talk to these children. I sensed that I was being frozen out, and so I said nothing more. They left early the next morning." A few years later, George saw a photo of New York City school children in a newspaper, and one of the kids looked like his missing daughter, Betty. George drove all the way to New York to investigate, but once he tracked down the child's parents, they declined to speak with him. In 1947, 2 years after the fire, George and Jenny attempted to involve the FBI, who offered to help, but in a curious turn of events, the Fayetteville Police and Fire Departments both denied their offer.
What do you gain in denying to help the FBI? All you have to do is give a couple interviews, maybe? Like, what?
Yeah, there's a lot of paperwork.
How busy is this fire department?
They're probably not that busy, but that's probably how they like it.
I think there's some shady shit going on there, but that's just my opinion.
George and Jenny turned to a private investigator named C.C. Tinsley.
Yeah. C.C. Tinsley's here.
That does sound
What you
like...
say?
No bones, huh? Sounds like a case for C.C. Tinsley.
Apparently they got an investigator from a time machine. They dropped him back in a time machine.
1945, of course
he said. They did not speak like that. That's not how they spoke.
Yes, that's how they spoke.
One suspicious revelation occurred when Tinsley discovered that a member of the coroner's jury who decided the Sodder house fire was an accident was the same life insurance salesman who had threatened George earlier in the fall.
Who put together this jury? The coroner? We're putting together a jury to investigate this crime. Can you wrangle up all the maybe some lunatic salesmen?
By the way, is there no police officer that knows how crime works? Like, how did they not interview this life salesman, man? Like,
I don't know. Look, I'm telling you, nobody knows how to do their job in this town.
it's unbelievable. Like, so you're telling me he screamed in your face that he's gonna murder your family?
Interesting.
Sounds like a good dude to me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Let's put him on that jury.
Another interesting find occurred when Tinsley interviewed townspeople about the fire. Tinsley heard a rumor from the town minister that the fire chief had been telling people that he'd actually found a heart in the ashes of the Sodder home, and that he'd hidden it in a dynamite box and buried it where the home once stood.
Why does the minister tell rumors?
Tinsley persuaded the fire chief to show him where it was buried, but once dug up, the heart was actually beef liver and had never been in a fire.
Oh, darn it, that's my darn sandwich. No wonder that sandwich tasted so bad the other day. I mixed them up.
Why the hell the chief did this was apparently to provide some closure to the Sodder family.
I guess you could say it's a heartfelt gesture.
Ryan?
Oh,
no.
shit.
No,
man.
no.
See you guys later.
Nope, sit down.
In August 1949, the Sodders hired a pathologist named Oscar B. Hunter, who excavated the dirt that covered the Sodder basement and the remains of the house. He found 4 shards of human vertebrae and sent this to the Smithsonian for analysis. They hypothesized that the bones were from a 16 to 17-year-old person. However, the oldest missing Sodder child was a 14-year-old boy, making it improbable that the bones belonged to him. They also stated that there was no evidence that the bones had been exposed to fire, and that the bones likely originated from the dirt George Sodder used to fill the basement, rather than the remains of the house. This was before DNA investigation had come into play, and according to the Smithsonian, the bones were given back to George Sodder, but their current whereabouts remains a mystery.
What did he do with them?
Exactly, no one knows. Huge tragedy that we can't DNA analyze those bones to see if they belong to the Sodder children.
Yeah.
After the Smithsonian revealed their findings, West Virginia Governor Oki L. Patterson called a hearing in the state capitol building in Charleston, West Virginia, where he officially declared the Sodder case to be closed, telling George and Jenny that their search was, quote, hopeless, end quote. This led to George and Jenny setting up a billboard on Route 16 advertising their missing children, where it remained for nearly 40 years.
40 years? They're tenacious.
I mean, to be fair, if it was my kids, I wouldn't stop. And
Yeah, I guess if 5 of your kids have vanished.
Oh, and also a salesman screamed in my face, "I'm gonna burn your house down and murder your family."
Yeah.
Then I think I would probably keep searching.
The billboard kept the story alive and mentioned details such as the children being kidnapped, the fact that the faulty wiring did not cause the fire, the fact that there was no bones or residue found, and lastly, accused the law officers involved of a cover-up. Quote, "What was the motive of the law officers involved? What did they have to gain by making us suffer all these years of injustice? Why did they lie and force us to accept those lies?" End quote. People around town had various theories. Some believed the mafia had been involved. Others believed the children were now in Italy or that they had been sold to an orphanage. The family received a letter from a woman in St. Louis saying that the oldest missing daughter, Martha, was in a convent there in St. Louis. Someone in Florida also said the missing children were living with Jenny's distant relative. And the ever-diligent George Sodder investigated all these tips, but each came up empty. Another hopeful tip came in 1968, 23 years after the fire, in the form of a photograph sent to Jenny specifically addressed to her, not the family. There was no return address on the letter, but it was postmarked in Kentucky. The photo was a man in his mid-20s. George and Jenny believed this could be their son Louis, who was 9 at the time of the fire. The man in the picture had the same dark brown eyes, dark curly hair, strong straight nose, and upwardly tilting left eyebrow. On the back, it had a handwritten note, quote, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Lil Boys, A90132 or 35, end quote. They hired a private detective to go to Kentucky and find him, but strangely, the detective was never heard from again.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard of a detective going missing. That's like a fish drowning.
And you know what's strange about this? On the internet, nobody seems to really care about this point.
When a detective goes missing, you've got some pretty powerful adversaries. I'd say it's time to quit the game.
Some on the internet have theorized the detective took the money and ran, but nobody knows what happened to him for sure.
I don't think the detective would have taken the money and run, though, because if you're a private eye, unless it was if it was enough to survive for the rest of his life.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, why would that's
Probably built up a nice client base. He's got to throw his Rolodex.
It's not like that. Like they gave him $1 million.
Right,
It was probably like 5,000. That's what the
enough
poster
for a few
said.
Sandwiches.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, those are some big sandwiches. But yeah,
Hey.
point taken.
George Sodder passed away shortly after in 1969 at the age of 74, and Jenny Sodder passed away in 1989 at the age of 85. Sylvia, who was 2 at the time, is the last remaining Sodder child alive. She maintains that her siblings did not die in the fire that night. Jenny Henthorne, Sylvia's daughter, told the Times West Virginian to post any information on websleuths.com. Quote, "My mom promised my grandmother that she would never let the story die. That's what my brother and I are doing now." End quote. After all these years, the question still remains. What really happened to the Sodder children that one fateful night? Was this truly the result of a tragic house fire? Or were the children actually kidnapped? Hopefully, for the sake of the remaining family, all of these questions will be answered. But for now, the case remains unsolved. I do think that there was some foul play at hand here.
Something's going on. Someone took those kids.
You think they're still alive today?
Maybe.
Because they're still out there, I think. I believe they're out there.
They would have to be, right? If you have a parent who ever told you that they were stolen in a fire and given a wonderful breakfast the next day, let us know.
You just...
This week on a special episode of BuzzFeed Unsolved, we investigate the unexplained disappearance of New York heiress Dorothy Arnold.
I'd love to be an heiress. I know she's probably gonna disappear or something.
So you want to be a trust fund baby,
I'd like someone to give me a lot of money for doing nothing.
and then you want to disappear.
But I want to get a lot of money and then vanish from the face of the earth.
And I'd love for you to disappear. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Tales of the missing wealthy have always captivated the public's imagination, and today we're looking into one such case that's more than 100 years old, Dorothy Arnold. Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold was the daughter of Mary Parks Arnold and wealthy perfume importer Frances Rose Arnold. As far as anybody knew, she'd had a happy home life.
Cool to be a perfume importer. I'd love to be that.
What would your fragrance be? What would the name be?
It'd be musky, I know that.
Okay, for a second I thought your fragrance name was gonna be just a chipmunk, like chipmunk noise. Could you imagine if someone said, "Oh, that's a lovely scent, what is that?" Okay, well, I'll see you later. On the morning of December 12th, 1910, the 25-year-old left her family home in the Upper East Side of Manhattan and told her mother she was heading downtown to buy an evening dress. According to the New York Times, when Mrs. Arnold offered to accompany her daughter, Dorothy said no. Quote, "When I find the gown I want, I will telephone you, and you can come down and see it." End quote.
I'll tell you what, she sounds like an heiress.
Pretty curt.
Yeah.
With your mother.
How about when I find the gown I want, maybe I'll talk to you then.
How about
You old hag.
when I need the funds, I'll call you. How about that?
Yeah. How often do you think this lady's buying gowns?
I mean, if she's buying an evening gown, you would assume she's buying an afternoon gown and a morning gown, maybe even a sleepy time gown.
That's right.
Her family believed that when she left at 11:30 a.m., she had as much as $30 in her purse, which in today's dollars would be more than $750.
Holy moly!
That's a lot of quiche.
Yeah.
That's a lot of quiche.
$30 going that far in 1910.
I don't even have $750 in my bank account.
I've never had $750 in my pocket. I rarely have had $30 in my pocket.
Well, I don't really carry cash anymore.
Who does?
Dorothy made her way down Fifth Avenue, stopping at a grocery store on 59th Street to buy some chocolates, then at Brentano's, a bookstore on 27th Street, where she bought a copy of Engaged Girl Sketches, a lightly humorous collection of short romantic stories.
Well, this sounds like quite a lovely evening for the lady.
A nice little jaunt through the Big Apple.
Yeah. I love a humorous romantic story.
Well, this story does not get humorous, nor does it get romantic.
Okay.
Around that time, reportedly 2 p.m., she ran into a friend from college, Gladys King. The two talked about a party they'd both been invited to, the same party for which Dorothy was supposedly dress shopping. Gladys left to meet her mother for lunch, and Dorothy was never seen again.
Whoa, there it comes.
So the last person to see her was Gladys. They were talking about the big party they'd been invited to.
Oh, it's gonna be a corker.
Kind of like Gossip Girl-y, I guess.
Oh, it is a little Gossip
Well,
Girl-y.
like in the 1910s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They should do
A reboot?
prequel.
In that era?
Yeah.
Let's talk about more shows people should watch that aren't the one we're
What we're establishing here is that we got our finger on the pulse of hot, searing teen dramas.
I don't like how you said that.
And this one's gonna be pretty good.
Teen should never be prefaced by hot and searing. You're just gonna have you going hot, searing, teens, and then just cut right there.
Well, that sounds good. I'd like to watch that.
Now they
That's
have footage of me saying that.
Yeah, now they got you too.
So they're gonna have both the Unsolved hosts talking about hot, searing teens.
I guess at this point we might as well say it in unison.
Hot, searing teens. When Dorothy wasn't home for dinner that night, her family started to worry. The next morning, they began calling Dorothy's friends. By that evening, with no one knowing Dorothy's whereabouts, the family began contacting private investigators. The investigators searched hospitals, morgues, and even prisons looking for Dorothy. They'd visited her friends in Boston, Washington, D.C., and other cities, but turned up nothing. Detectives in Europe even watched as people disembarked from ships arriving from the US to try to spot Dorothy. Nothing. Shortly before Christmas, with the private dicks having made little progress, the family went to the police. When they too came up empty-handed, the family finally made Dorothy's disappearance public on January 25th, a full 6 weeks after their daughter was last seen, hoping more clues would surface. Despite a $1,000 reward by Dorothy's family, more than $26,000 today, no leads managed to turn up Dorothy Arnold.
That's a long time. I know they had the private eyes working on it, but 6 weeks feels like a casual pace.
What are you gonna do? I mean, she was 25 years old. You would
She
think,
could have run away, maybe.
when a 25-year-old goes missing, you're not thinking she must have run away. You're thinking, yeah, she's probably doing stuff because she's 25 years old.
What do you mean by stuff?
I mean, when we started this show, I was 25.
Yeah.
If I went missing for like a week, do you think you'd be alarmed, or would you
I
rejoice?
think so.
That's nice. I didn't think you'd be alarmed. I think you.
You're my friend.
I don't like how you said that. You said it with. Like,
You're my friend.
Why are you yelling at me? You're my friend.
You're my friend.
Oh God.
I would be concerned if you disappeared. And we'd get a pretty baller season out of it. Because it'd just be me being like, I don't know, what do you got? Anybody seen him?
Because it captured America's attention for so long, this case has countless theories associated with it. We couldn't possibly go into all of them, so today, we're just presenting what I feel are the most likely. Our first theory is that Dorothy Arnold ran away. After searching her bedroom, investigators found information Dorothy had collected about various ocean liners she could take to Europe. It wasn't clear when Dorothy researched the ships, but the cruise companies were nevertheless contacted. They all told investigators no Dorothy Arnold had been aboard their ships.
In my 20s, it would have been very suspect if I disappeared because I was, for a brief while, very interested in McMurdo, the Antarctic research base.
That's where you wanted to go in your mid-20s? You wanted to go to...
Antarctica. It's really cool looking. There's a lot of ice.
You wanted to go to a frozen tundra for vacation.
Not just vacation, but I wanted to learn things and just live there. Maybe I still can.
You're a weird guy, man.
You wouldn't do that?
You're a weird dude. No, I wouldn't do that. When I think...
Oh, what? You're just like, Cabo, baby.
No, I'm not thinking Cabo, baby. I'm thinking...
Ooh. I don't know what that is.
On February 6th, 1911, Mr. Arnold received a postcard that had been sent from New York City that stated, quote, "I am safe," end quote, and appeared to be signed by Dorothy. Mr. Arnold, however, insisted it was a fake and that whoever wrote it merely copied Dorothy's handwriting samples that were published in the papers. I'd love for this theory to be true.
Agreed.
Dorothy, if you're watching this, you're probably 127 years old.
Old lady.
But, you know, good on you. You lived a good life.
And the good boys finally got to me.
Jesus Christ.
Dorothy, if you're watching this, comment. Top. We'll get to the top comment.
Wouldn't that be this show's greatest accomplishment? That we pissed off a Vanished so much that they unvanished themselves after they, you know, they got so angry that they came out.
Like if
and
D.B. Cooper was like, you assholes, listen.
I saw what you said about me getting speared by a pine tree.
D.B. Cooper breaks silence.
D.B. Cooper breaks silence to dunk on Ghoul Boys. While riding the New York subway in 1917, John Galvin, a man claiming to be a detective at Scotland Yard, grabbed a woman and reportedly declared, quote, "I know you, Dorothy Arnold. I've got you at last." End quote. The woman, not Dorothy Arnold, but rather a Mrs. Smith, begged strangers around her to help, but Galvin insisted he was a detective. He marched her into an NYPD precinct where officers let Mrs. Smith go and sent Galvin to Bellevue Hospital for observation.
I know you! Dorothy Arnold! Come with me!
I've got you at last! Another case cracked for Galvin.
Imagine being on the subway, maybe you have your AirPods in and some grown man grabs you by the shoulders, looks you in your eyes and shakes you and goes, "I've got you!"
Probably happens a lot in New York, I'm guessing.
Probably true, you know, the subway and such, but
It's a wild place.
not only did he grab her, it's not like this was a moment of terror, just a moment.
He marched her-
He marched her to the police station, made her get off the subway, walked with her, I'm assuming, while holding her shoulder still. That's insane.
Imagine the people at the precinct, too. This man shows up and he's like, "It's the missing lady! We've got her at last!" They're like, "Ma'am, do you have any ID?" She takes it out and they're like, "Why don't we get this guy somewhere? Quickly." That is padded.
I've cracked it! Here she is! Dorothy! Give me the money! Now!
Over the following decades, many others would come forward claiming to have seen Dorothy, or even to be Dorothy. None of the claims ever led anywhere. Casting doubt on the theory that Dorothy ran away is the fact that she left behind practically all of her valuables, expensive jewelry that could have been sold to help her journey, as well as personally valuable correspondence with friends.
So let's say I look like Kim Kardashian. And
Because you do, yeah.
and she goes missing. And she's not turning up. And I just really pour through the archives, get a good idea of what she's like.
Yeah, you watch 10 seasons of Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Watch it all, take copious notes.
Yeah.
I watch it on loop for 10 years. I show up a little aged,
Yeah.
but still, you know, I've
essence
still
is there.
got it, you
The
know, I've
essence
still
is
got what she's got
Yeah.
because I sort of look like her. And I just show up and it's like, "Oh, it's me, Kim. It's been a long time. I fell down a hole.
I have a beard now.
I got stuck in a cave." And you just make up a story. How, like, what are they gonna know? How could they possibly tell? Well, they're gonna be like, "Where's that mole on your butt cheek?"
I mean,
They don't know that.
No, I mean, I guess you're right.
So guess what? Suddenly, I'm rolling in it, baby. And there's gonna be 10 more seasons of keeping up with the Kardashians.
Under the ran away theory, we should talk about a sub-theory of sorts, that Dorothy eloped. When police were brought on the case, their first theory was that Dorothy had eloped. By the time the New York Times broke the story, however, that theory, quote, had been completely abandoned, end quote, after investigators interviewed everyone they were sure knew Dorothy in any way, every one of Dorothy's family members, and every friend they could get the name of. No one was aware of any secret marriage. But before investigators gave up on the elopement theory, one potential suitor merited extra attention: George Griscom Jr. George Griscom Jr. was a Pennsylvanian man in his 40s at the time of Dorothy's disappearance. The two had known one another for approximately 4 years. Though Dorothy's family never approved of George, Mrs. Arnold even went on record to say she would never let George marry her daughter. After she went missing, it came out that Dorothy had met up with George in Boston a couple months before she disappeared. She had told her family she was visiting a college friend, but there was evidence that Dorothy checked out of her hotel at the same time that George had checked out of a different Boston hotel. Reports say that Dorothy may have also pawned some of her jewelry to fund their rendezvous. While the Arnolds denied this, a Boston pawn shop was given the name Dorothy Arnold by someone while she was in Boston. At the time Dorothy went missing, however, George had been vacationing with his family out of the country for about a month. Even after replying to a telegram from the Arnolds that he didn't know where she was, the family remained suspicious. On January 16th, before the public even knew about Dorothy's disappearance, Dorothy's older brother, John, confronted George in Florence, Italy. During this interaction, reports suggested John even hit George and knocked him to the ground. In February, George ended his trip early and sailed back to America. He then hired his own private investigators to look for Dorothy. In the month that George paid for them, his investigators didn't find Dorothy either.
So if I'm George,
You are George, yes.
I'm not George, but if I'm George,
Okay, you're a creep, George.
I'm a creep. I'm a creep.
Yeah.
I want to marry this heiress. I pay for her to go stay somewhere for a little bit, but if we want to elope, when's the perfect time to do it? To make myself not look suspicious when I'm on vacation for a month with my family. So she goes, holes up somewhere for a little bit.
Yeah.
Family comes knocking at my door. She's missing. Where's she been? I don't know. I'm on vacation. Then I hire a private eye.
You forgot the part where they gave him a knuckle sandwich.
Whatever, they hit me. Big deal. I'm getting married. I'm stoked. Hire a private eye. He runs around town looking for her. I don't tip him off. Maybe I tell him like, hey, by the way, this is all bullshit. I don't know. Oh, here's extra money. Don't tell him.
Well, I don't know how much honor Gumshoes had at that time, but
Probably none.
okay.
Then I meet up with her later in like Sioux Falls or something, and we get married.
It's possible. It's a fun.
How hard could it be to
it's a
like
fun
change
theory.
your identity then? Very easy.
It seems like a lot of steps as opposed to just saying to the parents, "Yeah, we're gonna get married."
Well, I guess so. You're right about that. Yes. Yep.
Our second theory is that Dorothy was kidnapped and murdered. This is the theory that Dorothy's father eventually came to accept as what happened to his daughter. In the absence of clues, the family came to believe this was the only logical explanation. By April, the family was so convinced their daughter was dead that they started requesting the police give up the case. In fact, both her parents evidently wrote Dorothy out of their wills because they were so certain she would not resurface. Look, I am not going to pass judgment on a family that is going through grieving, but let me pass some judgment here. It's weird that you would ever want the case to be stopped being investigated. I guess that kind of prolongs the grieving period, but at the same time, if there's a chance, you would think you'd want to keep going. And then I don't know how quickly people write dead children out of wills.
Yeah, I don't know either. What is that, like 6 months later?
About 4.5 months.
That's pretty quick. I've got stuff in my fridge that's been there longer than that.
That's a full season.
There's a full season. A season. That's pretty quick. It's weird that he would jump to that, because if people were like, I'm so sorry, I bet she's out there somewhere, and he was probably just like, I bet they stabbed her.
I guess.
I bet they killed her.
I bet she's dead. I better write her out of my will. It's a weird thought, but once again, I don't know what it's like to go through that grieving process. So possibly this is what their process was, and you know, it's weird to us because we're outsiders and we're idiots, and you know, we're looking at this 100 years later. But I think we could say that's a bit odd and move on.
Seems odd. Let's move on.
Perhaps the strongest lead in the murder theory comes from one Edward Glenoris. In 1916, Glenoris was serving time in the Rhode Island State Prison for attempted extortion of a clergyman. He claimed he found God and wanted to come clean to the warden about his supposed involvement in burying the body of a woman he had come to believe was Dorothy Arnold. Glenoris said that in what he remembered being December of 1910, a man at a bar named Benoit asked for help from him and another man that some reports name Little Louis.
Yeah, these guys sound suspicious.
Little in front of any name.
He sounds suspicious or like the star of many, many silent films.
Yeah, I mean, the only Little I trust is Stewart, and that's it. But his is a last
Little
name.
Stewart?
No, Stewart Little.
Oh, the mouse.
Yeah, the
The
mouse.
mouse boy.
He was
That
a man. He was a mouse man. He drove a car.
Little Louis does, he sounds like a funny little, like, what's Little Louis up to this week? Oh, murdering a woman?
Benoit, Glenoris, and Little Louis were tasked with moving an unconscious woman from a house in New Rochelle to a home up the Hudson near West Point. The next day, Glenoris was informed that the woman had died, and he was asked to return to the West Point home to help bury her. Glenoris allegedly buried the woman under a concrete floor in the basement and was paid $250 for his involvement by a wealthy-looking man. There has been some speculation that man who paid Glenoris could have been George Griscom, though there's no hard evidence to support this.
Bad dudes. If your friend comes up to you and says, I need a favor, help me move a lady, and you're like, yeah, sure.
Into her apartment? No.
Oh, no. She is unconscious. Gotta
Anyway.
move her. Are we taking her to the doctor? No. To a quiet home somewhere upstate.
Where she could rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next day, by the way, oops.
After Glenoris confessed to helping bury the woman thought to be Dorothy, a team of detectives searched a home matching Glenoris' vague description on April 21st, 1916. When they got to the basement, the team was surprised to find an area of the concrete floor that appeared to have been broken up in the past. The area, however, was small, about 5 feet by 6 inches, and the caretaker claimed the floor had been broken to fix a gas pipe. When authorities returned a couple days later with the owner's permission to dig up the spot, they indeed found a gas pipe. Within the year, authorities were satisfied that Glenoris's claims were false. The third and final theory we're discussing today is that Dorothy accidentally died during an abortion. In April 1914, the Pittsburgh home of one Dr. C.C. Meredith was raided by police. Meredith, his nurse, and another doctor, one H.E. Lutz, were all arrested. The home was used as a private office where women would come seeking abortions. Lutz made a statement to the DA that at one time, Meredith had told him Dorothy Arnold had been one of his patients. From the way Meredith spoke of her, Lutz inferred that she had died and her body had been cremated in Meredith's office. While Lutz didn't admit to seeing Dorothy himself, he did testify that he'd witnessed another young woman who died in Meredith's care be cremated in the basement. In their raid, detectives did find 2 oversized furnaces in Meredith's basement. There's speculation that Griscom could have been who had impregnated Dorothy, but evidence of this or of Dorothy ever being in Pittsburgh for an abortion is scant at best.
Just 2 quick things about that. One, even back then, women didn't have control over their bodies so much that they would have to go to a basement to get an abortion from a creepy doctor who would throw them into a funny little furnace. Not that that's relevant to today at all.
Donate to Planned Parenthood.
But number 2, I don't really know if this applies to her. I don't know if she got the abortion, went there, or even got impregnated by Griscom, or if the Griscom thing is even true. So
this may be more just a wild public imagination.
there is circumstantial evidence that maybe this happened because Lutz, one of the 3 people that was arrested in the raid, did say that the other doctor had told him that, Dorothy was one of his patients. Whether or not that's true, who knows?
Well, she could have been there before disappearing as well, though?
Or maybe he's trying to shave some time off of his sentence.
Just lying?
Yeah, just lying. He's lying. Yeah, he's lying to get time off, possibly. Or it happened.
Yeah.
I guess we won't know. I mean,
Sorry.
that's why we're here.
Yeah.
I know it's the end of the episode and you were hoping, the boys are going to crack it. We never do.
That's the guarantee.
Stories of missing socialites have always captured the public's interest. Something about a seemingly perfect life gone astray continues to fascinate our darkest imaginations. For Dorothy Arnold, a lack of clues that confounded investigators has also given rise to a slew of theories to debate over for more than 100 years. Despite decades of attention and global searches, as for what actually happened to the 25-year-old New York heiress on that December day remains unsolved.
What theory do you got here, if any?
Now me, I'm a bit of a romantic. So I'd like to believe that she eloped.
I think she ran away.
Just ran away, no eloping, just scrammed.
I think she might have ran away.
And in 1910, how hard is it to run away?
Probably not that hard.
Yeah, what? You burn your ID, that's it. You're a new person.
This story could go a million different ways, but the thing is that we have nothing.
People just don't vanish like this.
Do you know anything about him being in prison or anything, jail?
No, not at all.
One of my biggest fears with this project is that, regardless of the outcome, that my father will be disappointed. Hi, Papa.
Hi.
How do you feel about trying to find your friend after all this time?
Well, I think it's exciting because I've been trying to see how to locate him and where he is, and I'm very excited that we're doing it together and see how there's a possibility to see where he is.
T'as vu comme il est gentil ton mari?
Vidéo souvenir avec San Francisco.
Je ne veux pas travailler.
Well, we moved to San Francisco in 1985. Your mom and I really loved the city. Like many people, we left our hearts in San Francisco. I met Serge at the Mission at Dolores Park tennis court, a public court, and we start talking, and all of a sudden he said, oh, you speak French because of my accent, and what did you learn French? And we ended up talking about Aix-en-Provence. That's the place in the south of France that I grew up. He was from there as well. So that's what really put us together in a more intense way, because we had a lot of things in common. I was working in the hotel business. It's a traditional, predictable work environment. And people are very nice, don't get me wrong. Serge was a little bit giving me a different side of life where life is about having fun. That's why he left his work as a journalist to become a salsa dance teacher and go around the world and discover the world. Some nights we did outings in Mission, have a simple meal, and Serge would be the one that at one point would go to tell the restaurant owner, can you put the music louder? And he would push the table, and he would take everyone on the dance floor, and then the restaurant, the cafe would become a nightclub until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. That was Serge.
When was the last time you saw Serge?
It was sudden. He called me and said, can you drop me at the airport tomorrow? I said, where are you going? Why? I said, yeah, I need to go. I need to leave quickly. He said that he was on his way to Cuba, but he stopped in Mexico first, and then he didn't want me to park the car, so he just drop me in front, and then that's about the last time I saw him.
Was Serge legally in the country?
I know that from time to time he was going to Northern California to work for a farm, but I don't think he had a work permit or so to teach salsa dancing. I think he was there as a race for sure. His parents' names were Robert and Josette. His parents live in Nice, in the south of France.
Robert Armand?
The funny thing is the name of these parents are different than him.
Oh.
It's not Armand. It's Kvitashiliev.
You don't know why he would have changed his last name?
I don't know. Yeah, they never told me. Yeah.
Did you meet any of his family?
No. I met a couple of his girlfriends. The last one, she's from Colombia. Her name is Jenny Jimenez. He left without her.
Well, they were still together. He just left.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They were dating. They were together when he left, but without her.
Oh, wow.
Serge really had a mark on me during my time in San Francisco. And San Francisco was one of the best part of our lives. And Serge was part of this experience. He was someone, like I said, you cannot forget. Now, as we age, I want to see him and see how we can reconnect and spend time together. Life is short, so if there's people in life that you want to see again, you will make extra effort to find them.
I'm going to move over and talk to my brother because you found one of the only leads that we have.
About 2 years ago, my dad told me this story, and I thought it was going to be a simple Google search and he would pop up, but he was an anomaly. It was almost like he didn't want to be found. The only lead I got was from a photographer. He posted an image from exactly the same time period. It was this black and white, beautiful shot of Serge.
Serge came from Aix-en-Provence and had a wild, though well-controlled streak in him. Loved salsa and Spanish and lived among Brazilians down Mission Way. So this author Lalo writes that here, Serge ended up in Havana. So he did make his way to Cuba. Is there a contact for him? Email. I could just email him.
I think the abrupt way in which he left San Francisco is a little bit alarming as well. Papa wasn't telling you this, but there was some stuff, probably should talk to Mom about it, but there's some stuff that he may have done. I think there's more to the farm. I think from what I've heard from Mom, you need to ask her these questions.
Why would Mom tell me about not Papa?
You know how Papa is. He thinks the best of people all the time. I think there may be more to it.
Even though he most likely isn't on Facebook or social media, it doesn't hurt to check. Clearly, it's a very common name. Honestly, just grasping at what I can so far. This does seem like this man has pretty much no digital trace, which is making this hard. So I think the best steps moving forward are going to be to try and find people that know him or knew him, and maybe then they can lead me to him. Lalo responded.
Are you gonna respond?
Sorry to disappoint, but I have not heard a word since I heard from him being in Cuba sometime in the early 90s. I received a postcard from him from Havana, said he was involved with a theater group, dance, etc., but nothing else. I lived with a Colombian woman named Jenny in San Francisco. They separated when he got busted sometime around 1988. Project
What does he mean he got busted?
Was it?
A good sign. He also uses a word, he was on the lam too, so that means that he was running away from something.
So you don't think it was just like the immigration people?
No, because if it's immigration, I'm sure he didn't have the paperwork to stay in the United States. But even if that was the case, after he left the country, that would have been done with. But the fact that he went on the lam and then he's been so uncommunicative means that there's more to this story. I'm sure there is.
Aman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I just want to know a little bit more about Serge. Papa mentioned that he worked on a farm. Was this a pot farm that he worked on?
He was working at a where they were growing marijuana illegally. Yes.
That could be a reason for him leaving, obviously.
You know what? All of this, though, if I come back, I don't know if Papa remembers or not, but I think that they were raided maybe once.
To clarify, he was raided because of just being there illegally.
I have a funny feeling, yeah. I mean, like his girlfriend, I'm positive.
Wait, Jenny, she was also there illegally?
Oh, positive. The thing is that you cannot open a bank, right, if it's illegal. So he has to have cash, and I think he buried it.
He just buried money like a treasure?
Did Papa say anything about that?
Papa never mentioned anything about, but he didn't mention anything about the pot farm. He didn't mention anything about
No, he will always say nice things
money.
anyway, because he likes the guy.
This story could go a million different ways, but the thing is that we have nothing.
We have nothing.
We have nothing. That's the thing.
So I had asked Lalo if he had any more information to give me. As far as Serge goes, I have not a clue of whatever happened after his disappearance and jumping bail in 1988 and 89. Jumping bail. That's a big, and that obviously means that he was hounded by authorities for something.
This was always going to be an uphill battle. All the leads we've had have come to a standstill, especially with now Lalo saying that he wasn't that close with him. With every little thing we learn more, it just seems like this whole process gets harder. And the mystery surrounding Serge gets a little deeper. I think by the end of me cataloging all these different instructors and schools, I'll probably be sending out around 50 to 70 emails tonight.
Oh my God.
And I'm just hoping that one of these people knows something, knows someone. I'm just worried it's going to be just a big waste of time.
Can't be a waste of time because you're doing something that means a lot to your dad, so already the effort is there.
If any of you out there either live in or have direct connections that can help me in either Havana, Cuba, or Nice in the south of France, please let me know. I have a call right now with Pauline Bézina. She's a French journalist who responded to my Instagram story that I posted a couple days ago asking for people in Nice or Havana to help out with a search.
It sounds like he was a very secretive person, like maybe would need to do a bit more digging in his background, maybe.
My father said they never talked about his family.
And he never reached out to your father, he never gave any reason,
No.
like it was just dead silence for like the rest of
That's what's weird to me too. Because even the photographer got a postcard. I don't know.
People just don't vanish like this, we'll find something, I'm sure.
Can you see me?
Hi, Papa. Unfortunately, nothing big yet.
It's difficult, yeah.
So he was definitely in Havana in the early 90s.
Oh, he made it to Havana, yeah, that's good.
Lalo said like one of the last times he saw him was after he jumped bail. Do you know anything about him being in prison or anything, jail?
No, not at all. I mean, he never mentioned that to me, so that's new.
Unfortunately, there's not much else that I was able to find, Papa. I'm sorry.
You don't have to be sorry. You don't have to be sorry. Thank you for trying, baby. Thank you very much.
Here is his first Christmas with his dad. Yeah.
As much as my father paints Serge as this person that lights up a room and that brings people together, So does my father. When you see him with his family and friends, you can tell how much people love him.
Papa is that.
I think one of my biggest fears about this project is that regardless of the outcome, that, that my father will be disappointed, And he'll never say that he's disappointed because he's just too good of a person to do that. But I think that's even more of a reason why I kind of want to give this to him. Well, we found something. We decided to go back to just using search engines, looking for Serge Armand. We started using alternate search engines like DuckDuckGo in case they were indexing search results better than Google were. And I guess we found something that we had missed maybe on Google. It's a website for an Aikido school in France. It says that at some point at the end of the 80s, they were able to organize some sort of like session or class, I guess, with dancer and choreographer Serge Armand. But the more interesting part is this.
It says that he, Serge, disappeared tragically under mysterious circumstances in 2006 in Cuba.
This article is written by someone named Jean-Marie Tung. I managed to find his phone number, so, we'll just give him a call, right?
Yeah.
Bonjour, est-ce que c'est Monsieur Tung, Dr Tung? Ah, bonjour, Dr Tung. J'ai trouvé votre article sur l'école Tenchi Aikido. Je vous appelle parce que on est en train de chercher pour un ami de mon père qui s'appelle Serge Armand et on ne sait pas si c'est la même Serge Armand.
Je l'ai rencontré donc une seule fois. Je ne sais pas exactement ce qui est arrivé. J'ai eu cette information oralement. Et je vais essayer de retrouver par quel canal j'ai pu connaître cette information. Dès que je les ai, je vous transmets par mail.
It doesn't seem like he knows him that well.
He did say he only met him once.
He met him once.
We're either at a dead end or there's just more questions than there are answers, which is kind of just how this entire investigation has been. Nice, nah? I have emails from I'm blanking. Now, I got a double email from this guy. He says the friend that introduced him to Serge knew him in San Francisco with his sister in the 80s. So it's the same Serge. Basically, he's saying that she was married to a lawyer named Bob Delventhal, and I don't know if this sister is Serge's or if it's the sister of his friend. And then on top of that, he says, the friend that introduced me is named Georges Vignati. He gives me the phone number of Georges. This is what's interesting here. He says, it's Georges who told me about the brutal disappearance in Cuba that was apparently an assassination. Yeah.
That's heavy, man. That's huge.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's him. To me, I'm a little shocked about the way he said that brutal assassination.
That's what scares me too. I mean, an assassination is much more than just a disappearance. I mean, clearly there's some sort of grounds for them to think there was an assassination.
My heart sank literally when they said San Francisco. And then it sank even more when I read that it was a brutal disappearance. Because when you use words like brutal disappearance for comparing assassination, it's just like, you just don't.
What happened to
that. Fuck me. I thought it was going to be crushed.
Yeah.
We were on the phone for like an hour. He's got a lot to say. He was very emotional when he called me back. He was tearing up.
Maintenant, tout se bouscule, je suis désolé, mais tout se bouscule un petit peu dans ma tête. Le Serge, pour moi, c'était plus qu'un ami, c'était un frère.
George told me Serge was a journalist in Paris in Le Monde and Libération. He was very involved with questionable people from questionable organizations, far left movement, very how could I say this? Il était militant, très sérieux, assez violent contre le gouvernement.
Very extremist, like an extremist group.
Very extremist, very, very extremist. So he had a huge network of people. He used to hang out with very questionable people, very dangerous people, always taking risks. At this time in the 70s, 80s, he would always go to the Netherlands, Latin America, and he would always come back with a lot of cash and a lot of weed. And you would never tell where he would be or what he'd done. It was I really felt I was in a movie when he told me all that, and I was like, wow, okay, this is just another level. It's just crazy how many stories they have on this guy, and no one knows what happened to him.
Pauline sent me some emails last night, and she found something interesting on myheritage.com, which says that Serge might have died of suicide. And we didn't think about looking at myheritage.com because he's not American. That was a big lapse on my part. It matches what Dr. Jung told us about him disappearing in Cuba under mysterious circumstances or being killed there. If it's kind of mysterious circumstances, a suicide is something that the police could rule it as. He has a sister with the last name Deventhal listed on his profile. And if you look at my emails with Dr. Tung, he says here, the friend who introduced me to Serge knew him in San Francisco with his sister in the 80s. She married a lawyer with the last name Deventhal.
So we definitely know it's him.
Oh, wow. I think his sister passed away too. In San Francisco.
San Francisco?
She died in 1990.
It's weird, she was living in SF too, though. How come I never met her?
There's a relative listed on the page. I think she's the one who created Serge's entry. If we could get in touch with her, that'd be incredible.
If we can get in touch with her, in George, that'd be amazing.
We don't tell Papa yet. I think we try to get as much information as we can. We'll try to reach out to Elizabeth.
Hopefully the relative is like cool with all this, you know? This is kind of like digging into something that is probably maybe very sensitive for the family. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hi, is this Miss Kvitashvili?
Yes, it is.
Hi, sorry to bother you. I'm actually trying to help my father learn more about one of his best friends who disappeared 30 years ago, who's actually related to you. His name is Serge Armand.
Yep, my cousin, he just disappeared.
We were told it was potentially a murder. I mean, how much do you know of what happened in Cuba?
Did your father not know that Serge was here in San Francisco living with his sister?
My father had no idea that he was living there with a sister, no.
Serge had to leave the country very quickly because he was about to be arrested for drug distribution, apparently. He had been dealing drugs, survived. He went out and then eventually made his way to Cuba and made his living there, dancing, but he never really succeeded. He married a Cuban woman.
Oh, wow.
And shortly thereafter, he committed suicide by jumping out of a building. The only way we know that is because the wife called and spoke with somebody in the family whose number she had.
That's very sorry for my pause. That's just, I didn't know that information. Would you be at all willing at some point to actually speak to my father just to share this information? So I think hearing it from you would mean a lot to him.
I'd like to ask his niece and nephew if it's okay.
Absolutely.
They're very private.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like to talk about this. I just want to check with them if it's okay.
Of course, I appreciate that.
They won't know, but they might remember.
Lalo gives the reason why he jumped bail. The reason was that he was busted for selling marijuana. He was living at the time with the woman in the pictures, Jenny. It was said she turned him in, not corroborated by anyone. And the apparent reason was that Serge had a terrible habit of spousal abuse. It seems like now I'm not only battling this question of how did he actually die, was it a suicide, was it murder, but now on top of that, he was abusive.
Are you feeling like you want to stop the project?
I don't know if I should stop the project. I really don't know if I should stop the project at this point. Lalo's email says that his own girlfriend hated Serge because she was the recipient of all the stories of abuse that she had been told by his girlfriends at the time. So that's multiple people.
I mean,
at this point, of course, at this point, it's not a matter of if he was abusive or not. It's a matter of like, how do I tell the story with the knowledge that he is abusive?
Well, the truth of the matter is, your story shifted from a beautiful story reuniting your father with his best friend to finding out who his best friend actually was. A lot of the time, something like this comes up in the past, people would hide it or would stop telling the story. Maybe it's important that you just tell the truth.
What the fuck?
Yeah, that shifted.
When you just said spousal abuse, my heart just, because my head's spinning a little bit now. Give me a sec. That was a shocker to me because that destroyed my perception completely. about who he was as a person. Okay, fuck it, you sold marijuana. Okay, whatever. But then
abuse is another thing.
Abuse is like part of me doesn't even want to continue. I mean, like, was there I was tearing up a little bit because it's just like, by painting this beautiful picture of this man, you'll be fucking devastated. Like, not even devastated. Devastated is not even the right word.
We're trying to get a hold of Serge's niece to get the final bits of detail. Serge's cousin seems to believe it was a suicide. Georges Vignati told Dr. Tung, and they've posted that it was actually a potential assassination. Out of all the ways you can commit suicide, that's one I could believe someone being thrown off a building could be misconstrued as suicide too.
That's so specific, though.
It's so specific, but someone could also push you off a building.
Of course.
How much do we tell Papa, is the question. Or do we tell him all? I mean, would he want to know everything? You know?
That's a fucking great question. I have no idea. I have no fucking clue.
The photographer told me that potentially the person that turned Serge into the police was actually his then girlfriend. And he mentions that it might have been because Serge had a habit of abuse.
It really doesn't surprise me. You know, their father, I don't know that their father was physically abusive because he wasn't really around, but he was certainly an emotionally abusive person, a very emotionally abusive person. So I'm not surprised to hear that, but I never heard that myself. You know, their father was a really complicated guy. On their birth certificates is not their biological father's name, my grandfather. And Serge retained a very romanticized hero picture of his father, and later in life when my grandfather got very old, Serge said to my grandfather, I want to come home and I want to take care of you. And my grandfather said, no, I don't want you to come home and take care of me. I can take care of myself. And he basically rejected Serge's reaching out to be with him. And I think this hurt Serge profoundly. And I think that, you know, Serge longed to have this connection with his father that I don't think he ever had. And I think it really impacted him deeply. The strongest memory I have is of the last time that my mom and Serge saw each other. And it was probably right before your dad drove him to the airport. My mom was very sick at this point, and he called my mom to bail him out of jail. I think my father saw Serge as kind of like this kid who never grew up and was always needing other people to take care of him. And so here my mother was dying of cancer, and he's calling to have her bail him out of jail, which she did. And then he came to say goodbye. I just remember after he left how sad she looked. She knew it was the last time she was ever going to see him because she knew he was breaking the law by leaving and wouldn't be able to come back into the country, and she also knew that she was really sick. After my mom died, we never heard a peep from him because it would have just been a reminder of all that he lost. And then I learned about his suicide. And then sometime after that, I was contacted by his widow, Wilema. She would share with me about herself and her life with Serge and how much he'd meant to her. I don't know that there was a note or anything like that. I know that it was a hotel. Wilema could certainly give you that information if she felt open to that. Some people suspected that he might have been sick. Some people suspected that maybe he had debt. You know, there were all kinds of like suspicions of what it was. But, you know, I actually did see him one last time in France about a year before he died. I got the sense when I met him and talked to him that he was a deeply unhappy person. That there was this joie de vivre that was there, but that it was masking a very, very profound loneliness and unhappiness. He had charisma, and like some of that we're born with, and some of that we, I think, build up in order to defend ourselves from the sad feelings that we can have.
You not only know of his death, but the fact that he couldn't be involved in abuse is obviously terrible and unacceptable. And it's frustrating because I wish I could just call him and get the truth from him. It's heartbreaking because, you know, you have some flashback in life, and then there are people that throughout your life, even it's a short moments or long moment that make your marks in your life, and then Serge was one of these people. And now I feel like I don't even know who he was.
Well, I guess what I'm worried about as far as my father is that through uncovering all this, I've distorted all these positive, beautiful memories he had, not just of Serge, but specifically their friendship, the impact Serge had on him and this time in his life, which I think he views as some of the best years of his life. And I'm just scared that this truth that I've unearthed has tainted it. What would you do? What would you do if you were to see him again in person?
Oh, we're going to hurt for a long time. And I'm sure we're going to open a good bowl of wines. And then we're going to put some music and we're going to dance two of us, even if there's nobody around. And we'll do some salsa dancing and so we'll put some Santana music or some Brazilian and we'll do a dance around the room. And that's what we'll do.
Hi, Pauline. This is my father. This is Samok.
Hi, nice to meet you. Enchanté.
Oh, bonjour.
Bonjour, bonjour. Je suis un petit peu encore dans l'émotion parce que Serge m'a laissé une émotion très forte dans la connaissance. J'ai eu une petite information peu de temps après son décès. On m'a laissé entendre quand même quelque part qu'on l'avait un petit peu aidé à tomber.
Ah.
Alors, ça laisse sous-entendre beaucoup de choses. Cuba, c'est la vie particulière dans la mesure où Serge est un gringo argenté. Ils sont pas très bien vus, les gringos, là-bas. Hein. Est-ce qu'il y a un lien entre cette façon de voir? Est-ce que c'est autre chose? Soyons un petit peu aussi clairs par rapport à ça. Serge, c'est quelqu'un qui trafiquait beaucoup.
Oui.
Est-ce qu'il a un peu abusé, peut-être? Je sais pas. C'est quelqu'un qui aimait beaucoup la discrétion. Parce que je pense que quelque part, au fond de lui, il était terriblement seul. C'est quelqu'un de très solitaire, qui avait besoin de cette solitude d'ailleurs pour justement régler tous les problèmes de sa vie. Il y a eu aussi des cas où des gens qui étaient aussi heureux dans leur vie et qui cachaient une part d'ombre aux autres. Est-ce que quelque part cette part d'ombre est arrivée très violemment et n'a pas poussé au suicide? Personnellement, j'y crois pas. C'est un homme qui aimait trop la vie, qui avait un engouement mais vraiment absolument incroyable pour tout ce qui est vivant. C'est pas possible.
Honestly, I don't think anybody really knew who Serge was except for himself, and I think that's a tale in life in general. It's like how well do you know someone? How well do you actually know someone, what they're putting on? And I think that's one thing he was struggling with as a person, and some people got the happiness and some people got the sadness.
Hi, baby.
Hi, Papa. Knowing everything now that you know, are you glad that you know this information?
Yes, I'm glad to know because I would rather know the truth. But it's difficult because I have to find a way to keep all these beautiful memories I have with Serge while living with the darker truth of who he really was. With the mysterious ending, and that's the personage as well. He was mysterious. His death is similar to the story of the person.
I'm just happy that I got to work on this project with you. And I thank you for letting me tell the story of you and your friend.
Thank you, Pepe. Thank you to you. Thank you, both of you. I'm glad we did it.
I'm glad we did it too.
Creo que podías amarlo y también podías odiarlo. Cada quien tiene su idea de cómo lo vio, de cómo lo sintió y cómo lo vivió. Yo tengo la mía. Sobre todas las cosas, más que una pareja, a veces hablábamos que más que una pareja éramos una familia. Con él pude vivir momentos que fueron devastadores, pero también pude vivir momentos que fueron muy hermosos, espiritualmente muy profundos. Y eso yo siempre se lo voy a agradecer.
¿cómo describirías tú a Sergio en unas palabras?
Un alma libre.
In my head I played the part of the lover who was stung and innocent, abandoned in the dark when he was young. I've traveled far off countries, I've seen many far out things, but I've never left this man-shaped cage, just shaking off this skin. Picture of the little boy as he reached to watch the sun, but now more sand's gone through the glass than there's still left to run. And when the lamp is burning low and the stitches slit their seams, into that darkness we'll go with our dreams.
This week on BuzzFeed Unsolved, we look into the mysterious disappearance of one of the world's greatest mystery writers, Dame Agatha Christie.
The dame herself.
The dame herself.
Queen of mystery becomes a mystery.
Now that is a very offensive...
Where'd she go?
I don't know.
Oh.
I guess that's what we'll have to find out.
I was not aware of this.
I get these case files just like you do. They just get slapped on my desk and they say solve it. And every single time, I don't.
You got there like almost once, right? There was an unsolved with a question mark at the end of it.
Well, you know, almost isn't going to cut it. We need a W in the column.
You want to slap the cuffs on somebody. That's a win.
Yeah. I want to point at the skeleton and go,
You
did it.
We gotcha. And then stomp on the skull.
Yeah. I don't know about that part, but
okay.
I think the finger point is, that's what I want.
Well, this one sounds like a real whodunit.
From the whodunit master herself. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Agatha Mary Clarissa Miller was born on September 15th, 1890 in Devon, England. The youngest daughter of upper-middle-class Frederick and Clara Miller, Christie was homeschooled in a somewhat unusual fashion. Clara reportedly didn't want her daughter to learn how to read until she turned 8. By the age of 5, feeling understimulated, Agatha taught herself to read, beginning a lifelong obsession with books.
You won't teach me to read? Fuck you! I'll read!
Maybe that was the strategy, because kids don't want to read. I'm gonna tell my kids, hey, no reading, no vegetables.
And you like drive them out to the woods and leave them there.
Okay, I don't know about that part.
Well, then they have to sort of, use their wits to get home.
Yeah, but that's not really the reverse psychology. That's just torture at that point.
That's a good way to raise kids.
I think you're not going to spend any time with my kids.
Okay, that's fair.
Short stories.
I know this is a show about crime and mystery, but let's take a nice little lesson from this. She got rejected over and over again, and eventually got that deal and became a successful writer. So if you're out there and you're working on something, people keep telling you, not good enough. Maybe it is good enough. Keep at it.
Keep knocking on that door until they eventually open.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
It's a sweet message from the boys for you in the middle of...
And you don't get
another-
many of them, so
No.
cherish this.
Yeah. Anyway.
Back to the story.
Yeah.
Agatha proved to be a prolific writer, and her rise to stardom was meteoric. Unfortunately, within only a few years of achieving widespread fame, she suffered a period of great emotional hardship. Her mother, with whom she'd been extremely close, passed away in 1926. Her grief brought on a massive case of writer's block, and she was unable to finish the book she was working on, The Mystery of the Blue Train. Making matters worse was the fact that Archie, just as Agatha's mom had predicted, had begun an affair with a woman 10 years her junior, Nancy Neal.
Archie! I was rooting for him.
Yeah.
I was. A hunky aviator? Sign me up. Agatha's going through some stuff. Her mother just died?
Yeah.
And you're gonna go down the block to get a little strange? You sicko. You nasty man.
Next time you fly in the sky, don't come back.
Or do come back, but, straight into the ground, Buster.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
Christ.
Yeah, you heard me, Archie. You
I think he's dead.
Good.
Holy shit!
On December 3rd, 1926, at around 9 p.m., Agatha put 5-year-old Rosalind to bed and kissed her goodnight. The 36-year-old author grabbed an attaché case, left her house wordlessly, and drove off into the night. The next morning, Agatha's car was discovered hanging precariously over the edge of a chalk quarry. It appeared the car had been run off the road, careening towards a cliff and stopping just before the edge. Inside was the attaché case, a fur coat, and her driver's license. The driver was nowhere to be found. In short order, the author's disappearance became headline news around the globe. The famed mystery writer had herself become the central character in a real-life thriller. 3 days later, however, the search for the acclaimed novelist was suddenly called off after Christie's brother-in-law reported receiving a letter from her the day after her disappearance, saying she was going to a spa in Yorkshire, quote, for rest and treatment, end quote. The police, however, suspected the letter was fake and reopened the case almost immediately. A week after Agatha's disappearance, police were flummoxed. Despite hundreds of reported sightings of the famous author all across the UK, no tips led anywhere. Authorities began resorting to increasingly desperate strategies. They brought one of Agatha's dogs to the scene of the abandoned car in the hopes it could track her scent. Instead, the dog, quote, whined pitifully.
What a shitty dog.
Hey, man. Not every dog's gonna be a bloodhound, okay?
No, almost everyone isn't.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, this dog signed up for belly rubs and bones.
Let's put the dog out there, see what it does. Oh, nothing.
If that's your first line of defense as a police force, is to be like, maybe the dog knows who did it. Maybe.
Have you interviewed the dog?
Yeah.
The dog said something about a woof woof.
At one point, for unclear reasons, police speculated Agatha was possibly in London, quote, disguised and probably in male attire, end quote. Detectives scoured her manuscripts for clues she may have left behind and even brought in a group of mediums and spiritualists to hold a seance at the scene of her disappearance. Unsurprisingly, none of these efforts went anywhere.
They gotta get some actual people working on this case.
It's weird that they're like, hey, one of the most important, influential figures in the UK went missing. Let's break out the Scooby-Doo playbook. Let's have the dog look
See
for
what
them.
the dog says.
Yeah.
No dice there. How about some magicians?
Yeah.
We got any jugglers in the wings?
It seems like the only thing they didn't do was police work.
Yeah.
If you went missing, I would go through the proper channels.
Thank you.
To cover my tracks.
What?
It's reported that between 10,000 and 20,000 people helped search for the author, with over 1,000 police constables involved. It's even thought this may have been the first time airplanes were deployed in the search of a missing person. On December 11th, the New York Times reported that there had finally been a substantial break in the case. Before she left, Christie had apparently left 3 letters behind. One was the already mentioned letter to her brother-in-law. The second was to her private secretary, which only contained details about her schedule. The third and most intriguing letter was left for her husband. Allegedly, Archie refused to hand the letter over to authorities and instead allegedly burned it, maintaining it contained no information about her whereabouts.
Archie, up to no good again.
Now, maybe I'm just a paranoid guy, but it seems a little suspicious if your missing wife wrote you a letter and before you could hand it over to the police, you just said, hey, trust me, that letter was not important. Also, I burned it.
Yeah.
Let's do a vibe check
Let's
here.
do a vibe check. It's a classic BuzzFeed Unsolved vibe check.
Yeah. Where are you at with Archie? What are your
I think
vibes
he's a
on this
nasty
guy?
man.
I think he's a nasty man.
I think he's
as
a
well.
nasty, nasty man.
Guilty, I'm not sure.
Can't say that yet.
But I am interested.
He's not on my good side, I'll tell you that.
On December 15th, Bob Tappan, the banjo player in the resident band at the Swan Hydro Hotel in Harrogate, Yorkshire, reportedly thought something looked a bit familiar about the woman dancing the Charleston as he played Yes, We Have No Bananas.
Yes, we have no bananas.
Do you know that song?
Yeah, I know that song.
Do any of you know that song?
It's a good song.
You, I've said this before, are a strange man.
Guilty as charged.
It turns out Bob Tappan was correct. The woman dancing in front of him in Yorkshire was indeed the real Agatha Christie. It had been 12 days since Agatha Christie was last seen. But here she was, getting down to a novelty song on a Wednesday night. Agatha's letter to her brother-in-law was correct after all. She was spending time at a spa in Yorkshire.
They didn't think to check the spa?
No.
These dipshits.
The first thing that happened in this case was they got a letter from her brother that said, hey, I'm in Yorkshire. And they were like, bullshit. Now
Call the magician.
Get her dog on the horn.
Get those planes up in the air.
How many people can we get on this case?
20,000? Start walking around everywhere else.
And whatever you do, none of them are to go to Yorkshire, ever.
Don't you say fuck.
Now, where does this story go, you might ask?
Yeah, now I'm curious.
Somehow, Agatha had gotten from her car to King's Cross Station, where she'd boarded a train to Harrogate. She had virtually no luggage, but was having a pleasant and uneventful stay, joining in on balls and dances and receiving spa treatments. Despite the fact that she was the subject of a nationwide search, no one seemed to bother her, perhaps because she had checked in under an assumed name, Mrs. Teresa Neal.
Whoa. She's good at coming up with fake names.
Shall I remind you what the name of the mistress was?
Teresa Neal?
It was Nancy Neal.
Nancy Neal. Okay, cool.
That may come in later, just saying.
I mean, also just smart to, use real names as your fake names, I guess, right?
That's true.
Because if anytime you try to come up with a fake name, it sounds like something stupid, like Ricky Goldsworth or something.
That's the dumbest name I've ever heard.
Anyone who comes
Watch your
down it.
fucking mouth.
What'd you say? Whoa, dude, that was weird. You all right? Ryan?
Oh. No, it's crazy to check in under a fake name.
After Tappan notified police of the lauded author's whereabouts, Archie traveled to the hotel to pick up his wife. Reportedly, Agatha greeted her husband with a, quote, stony stare, apparently at a total loss for who the man was. Archie told reporters, quote, she does not know who she is. She has suffered from the most complete loss of memory, end quote.
At what point does she lose her memory? Because she still made it to where she needed to go, so if she lost her memory before then, is she on autopilot? Does the mind retain its sort of intentions and short-term goals? That's gotta be freaky to be like on the road and like, well, I know where I'm going, but I don't know who I am.
Yeah, but how many times have you been driving, daydreaming, listened to some tunes on the radio, and then you're like, whoa, I'm at the destination I was supposed to go to.
That makes sense. I black out every time I get behind the wheel. Yeah.
When I got to set today, I was like,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Every time Ryan gets here, he screams, "Where am I? Who am I?"
And then I scream, "I figured out teleportation."
And we say, "No, no, no. No, no, no."
And they have to talk me down every time.
We have this conversation so often.
I wouldn't recall.
When asked by reporters pointedly and explicitly why his wife chose the name Neil, Archie deflected, saying she had no idea who she was, and pointed to the fact that Agatha had apparently placed ads in the newspaper under that name in the hopes a relative would come forward and help her learn about herself. After the incident, Agatha and Archie lived apart, with the author taking up residence with her daughter in a London flat as she underwent a course of psychiatric treatment. According to Agatha, this therapy gradually restored her memory. In 1928, she and Archie officially divorced. Finally free from her stressful relationship, Agatha was able to complete The Mystery of the Blue Train. That year, she also fulfilled a lifelong dream to travel on the Orient Express, which would eventually inspire one of her most famous novels, Murder on the Orient Express. In 1930, Agatha married archaeologist Max Mallowan. During her second, happier marriage, Agatha continued to write prolifically, sometimes completing 2 or 3 books a year. She did, however, avoid writing about at least a couple subjects. In her autobiography, Agatha wrote neither about her disappearance nor the disillusion of her first marriage, saying only, quote, "There is no need to dwell on it," end quote.
Kick ass if all of the rest of her novels were just about pilots being murdered.
That would be actually pretty amazing. Yeah. Also, just incredibly British. No need to dwell on it.
That's true. No.
With Agatha Christie back safe and sound, though clearly reluctant to speak about what occurred, it's time we dive into theories surrounding just what happened that December 1926. Our first theory is the whole ordeal was a publicity stunt. This was one of the earliest theories when first Agatha went missing. Her novel, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, had been released earlier that year, and the theory goes that Agatha knew that if she went missing, her enormous popularity would mean she'd be headline news, thus driving sales. One big hole in this theory is the fact that the book had already been incredibly popular without the need for a stunt. When asked if she could fake her own death, Agatha's secretary replied, quote, "It is ridiculous. Mrs. Christie is quite too much a lady for that," end quote.
Hey, I buy it.
Yeah. Wait, what?
I buy it.
That it was a publicity stunt?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem that far off. One, all you have to do to the secretary is say, yeah, just tell them I'm far too much a lady for that.
Okay, gotcha.
Here's 10 quid. And if the novel was a success, who's to say? There's a lot of successful novels out there. Doesn't mean all the authors go on to become, historic figures in literature. So maybe she really wanted to cement herself in the public eye, and that'd be a good way to do it. I think it's a great idea.
I feel like the book was already a hit.
I mean, Tom Hiddleston dated Taylor Swift. Remember that?
Tom Hiddleston.
You remember that? They wore shirts that said, "I heart TS, I heart TH."
How dare you bring up TT?
TT? Was that their couple name?
It was for me. Tom and Taylor.
You're a ride or die for TT, huh?
I love TT.
Oh.
Counterpoint, she also hated the limelight. She did not like that. She also had stage fright. Seems a bit much for someone of that makeup.
Counterpoint, mon frere. She's going to a spa, so she clearly likes a little luxury. I'm thinking maybe she got used to that sweet, sweet quiche. You know what I'm saying?
Counterpoint.
What?
She checked in under a false name. Didn't even use Agatha.
Yes, but I'm saying that's part of the ruse to get more famous, to get more money. This is all part of it.
Are you counterpointing
Yes, I am.
You son of a bitch.
Yeah, I know. I'm done doing it. I mean, the end goal here, of course, she checked in a fake name because that's just adding to the narrative here.
Counterpoint.
You're keeping track of this?
In a spa, when you get a massage, they put your face in that little toilet bowl thing. They can't even see your face. They wouldn't even know it's her.
You're missing the point.
You're missing the point.
Our second theory is that Agatha intentionally set the whole disappearance up to cast a public spotlight on, and thus humiliate, her husband for his adulterous ways. The weekend of her disappearance, Agatha had known that Archie was planning to stay over at his paramour, Nancy Neal's place, which, perhaps not coincidentally, was a mere 6 miles away from where Agatha's car was found. Needless to say, Archie's romantic weekend was torn to shreds due to his wife's disappearance. Biographer Jared Cade has posited that Agatha not only planned her disappearance, but also had help doing so from her sister-in-law and childhood friend, Nan Watts. Cade suggests that after abandoning her car, Agatha took a local train to London, where she stayed with Nan that night. Nan then would have given her money for her stay in Harrogate. Cade came to this conclusion after persuading Nan's daughter Barbara to go through family papers. However, the disappearance does seem to be a very elaborate and public way to handle a cheating spouse, especially for a person as private as Agatha.
You know, someone who has been cheated on or made to look a fool, that inspires probably some desire for vengeance, whether it be violent or humiliation.
You working through some stuff right now?
No, I've actually never, I'm trying to put myself in her mind. That's never happened to me.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Especially a flyboy like that, a cocky flyboy.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Even after your mother, your own mother, said, I'm telling you, this guy's no good, he's dirt.
That's true.
And then you'd say to your mother, fuck off, Mom, I love him. Okay?
Yeah.
And he's not gonna make me look like a fool.
I fought my mother for you.
And then your mother dies, so that's another thing.
And now she's dead.
And then he cheats on you?
And then you cheated on me.
After what you said to your mother and sticking up for him and having faith in him and believing in him?
She's rolling over in her grave because of you.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm gonna change my name and wear a wig and get on a train. Makes sense.
Yeah, I guess.
Our final theory is the one put forth by Agatha herself, which is that she suffered from memory loss due to her car crash. In February 1928, Agatha was interviewed by the Daily Mail about her disappearance, the one and only time she ever spoke about the incident. The author felt it necessary to explain the events to the best of her ability, as she had continued to be torched by the media with speculation that the whole ordeal had been made up. According to Christie, she had been suffering from insomnia before her disappearance, sleeping on average only 2 hours a night. Christie was known to suffer from bouts of despondency and depression, and on the day of her disappearance, she was even having suicidal thoughts. Quote, I just wanted my life to end. As I passed by Newlands Corner that afternoon, I saw a quarry, and there came into my mind a thought of driving into it. However, as my daughter was with me in the car, I dismissed the idea at once. End quote. Agatha continued with her recollection of what happened after she left the house that evening. Quote, all that night I drove aimlessly about. When I reached a point on the road which I thought was near the quarry I had seen in the afternoon, I turned the car off the road down the hill towards it. I left the wheel and let the car run. The car struck something with a jerk and pulled up suddenly. I was flung against the steering wheel and my head hit something. End quote.
My heart breaks for this woman.
Yeah, she went through a lot. She lost her mom.
Yeah.
Writer's block. Her husband's being an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
You could get to the best of anybody.
Agatha continued, quote, up to this moment, I was Mrs. Christie. After the accident in the car, however, I lost my memory. I remember arriving at a big railway station and asking what it was, and being surprised it was Waterloo. It is strange that the railway authorities there did not recall me, as I was covered with mud and I had smeared blood on my face from a cut on my head. End quote.
Yeah, that probably sticks out, huh?
One, the fact that she's covered in mud and has blood on her head, but also like, hey, that kind of looks like Agatha Christie.
Do people know what authors look like?
At this time, she was one of the most famous people.
I recognize Stephen King.
Well, I mean, it'd be hard to miss him.
Yeah. Other than that, James Patterson, I don't know what he looks like. James Patterson could come up to me on the street and kiss me on the mouth. And I would say, nice to meet you. You know, who are you?
That's what you would say?
Yes.
It is a bit odd that there was, 20,000 people involved in a nationwide search, and these two bozos at the
the railway station didn't go, hey, you remember that lady who was covered in mud and blood and kind of looked like Agatha Christie on the day that the accident happened?
You know what, though? And apologies to any English viewers if I'm getting this wrong, but my read on the English people is that they're a bit nonchalant and perhaps don't want to get involved with something like that. So I could see two workers at this railway station just seeing her and then sort of turning to each other and be like, looks a bit worse for wear.
I hope you're ready for the wrath of the UK that's going to come at you on Twitter. You're going to hear things like, I don't know if I agree with that. That Shane's a bit of a disagreeable fellow, no?
Quote, I then remember arriving at the hotel in Harrogate. I was still muddy and showing signs of my accident when I arrived there. I had now become, in my mind, Mrs. Tessa Neal of South Africa. End quote. During the interview, Agatha expressed a near nostalgia for her lost time. Quote, as Mrs. Neal, I was very happy and contented. I had become, as it were, a new woman, and all the worries and anxieties of Mrs. Christie had left me. When I was brought back to my life as Mrs. Christie again, many of my worries and anxieties returned, and although I am not quite well and cheerful, and have lost my morbid tendencies completely, I have not quite that utter happiness of Mrs. Neal. End quote.
God, I'd love to go into a fugue state.
That's a very strange wish.
You wouldn't want to?
You know what? If I could be guaranteed that there wouldn't be lasting damage and to know that I would come back from it, yeah, it'd be kind of fun in the way that like those insufferable people who try like LSD are like, you lose your ego, man. You just tap into the universe and open a door in your mind. You know, it's like you forget your sense of self. If you don't know who you are, then suddenly it's like, well, what's reality?
Well, I don't know, man. I guess, and apologies if this gets a little dark, anybody who couldn't use a little vacation from themselves, I don't know if they're wired right.
Critics of Agatha's account wonder how she could have seen newspapers plastered with her own face throughout her stay and remain oblivious. The author addressed this during the interview. Quote, I read every day about Mrs. Christie's disappearance and came to the conclusion that she was dead. I regarded her as having acted stupidly. I was greatly struck by my resemblance to her and pointed it out to other people in the hotel. It never occurred to me I might be her, as I was quite satisfied in my mind as to who I was.
I love the idea of this bloody, muddy woman walking around the hotel with this newspaper and being like, can you get a load of this stupid bitch?
Or just being like, you think this looks like me? Do you? How about now? I would be like,
well, she can't be me because I'm covered in blood and mud.
Agatha further detailed how, by spending time with doctors and relatives, she was able to gradually remember who she was. After the interview, it appears few were convinced she was telling the truth. The Irish Times went so far as to call her version, quote, as complete a work of fiction as anything she had written, end quote. One inconsistency critics continued to point to was that Agatha's story didn't add up. Literally, the money didn't add up. Many were suspicious about how Agatha, as Mrs. Neal, could have afforded the hotel stay, including the spa services, new clothes, and indulgent drinks and meals. In the interview, however, Agatha noted she'd originally left the house with 60 pounds. Today, 60 pounds would be the equivalent of about 3,800 pounds.
I would assume that would cover a week at this hotel.
Well, so, you know, what are they, looking at her bank account? Whatever, they don't know.
Yeah, she could have had some funny money.
We've all got a little walking around money.
Yeah, funny money.
Funny money.
I actually believe her.
You believe her?
I do think that this is what happened. I know it sounds crazy, but it sounds too crazy for it not to be true.
You know what? I'm compelled to different degrees on these different theories, but because she was around after this and has given her own account of it, I am going to believe her on this one.
Yeah.
Because it's an opportunity we're rarely afforded on Unsolved. If this is her story, then I think we owe it to her to buy it. No one was really hurt, you know.
No, that's true.
You know.
I mean, some pride was hurt on the police force and her husband.
I think they can handle that.
I think they can handle that.
And they're all dead anyway, so.
Yeah, I guess so.
Probably not.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also, like I said, it's stranger than fiction, in my opinion.
So yeah, you know what? Yeah.
Okay.
Agatha's last public appearance was for the 1974 film premiere of Murder on the Orient Express, starring Albert Finney as Hercule Poirot. The author reportedly thought the film was a fair adaptation, though did note the famed detective's mustache was not nearly luxurious enough. Agatha Christie passed away peacefully on January 12, 1976, at age 85. The novelist, poet, and playwright wrote 75 novels, including 66 detective novels and 14 short story collections. Her works have sold over 100 million copies and have been translated into some 100 languages. And while she was responsible for some of the most popular mystery stories ever told, perhaps Agatha Christie's greatest mystery, what really happened after she drove into the night one December Friday in 1926, remains unsolved.
Good for her. Yeah. I mean, you know, she seemed to try and clear it up, but good for her for involving a little mystery in her own life, whether she liked it or not.
When you look at it, she had the thing that we all aspire to, which is a week guilt-free at a spa.
I like just the thematic consistency of her life mirroring some of these detective novels. It would be like if you got murdered.
Or murdered somebody.
Or murdered, yeah.
Somebody,
Anybody at all.
Yeah, it would be like that.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
I think so. This week on BuzzFeed Unsolved, we're hearing the case of the most missingest man in America, New York State Supreme Court Judge Joseph F. Crater.
It's not a contest though, right? You know, anyone who's missing is missing.
Well, this is something that the newspapers dubbed him as, the most missingest man in America. You'll see that...
Sensationalism.
Well, you'll see that people had some fun with this one.
Well, I'm fascinated to know what makes someone more missing than someone else. I'm excited to find out.
Let's get into it.
Joseph Force Crater was born on January 5th, 1889, in Pennsylvania, less than 100 miles from New York City. Crater was a dapper dresser and a hard worker, attending Lafayette College for his undergraduate education and eventually Columbia Law, where he met his future wife, Stella Wheeler. Stella was married when she met Crater, but the young lawyer helped her with her divorce, and the two married in 1917.
To have research officially show that he's a dapper man?
Yeah.
Not a bad situation. You think this guy was one of those fucking bow tie dudes who are like, Doctor Who is cool. Bow ties are cool.
Okay, I find that quite rich when you yourself are wearing...
I've never worn a bow tie.
You're wearing a pinstriped shirt with a little...
I dress like an ice cream man.
That's a clothing rose. So I just think it's rich that you're saying, who's your fucking bow tie dude? Now watch and listen to my quartet.
I will never wear a bow tie. That is a Shane Madej guarantee.
Crater worked as a law clerk and taught at various colleges around New York, eventually landing a job as a secretary for New York Supreme Court Justice Robert Wagner. Crater began practicing law at his firm when Wagner was elected to the U.S. Senate, becoming somewhat of a protege under the politician.
I mean, you get working for a rich white man, you're probably fine.
That you become a rich white man,
yeah,
I suppose.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
You know, they'll be pulling their strings, doing their bullshit.
If you choose to spend your career next to a non-rich white guy, what does that make me?
Boy, did you blow it.
I did blow it. I hitched my my line to the wrong ship here.
Yeah, you sure did.
He's gonna pull me right into an iceberg.
Crater went on to become rather wealthy as a lawyer. In 1927, he bought an apartment on Fifth Avenue as a gift for Stella, and the couple also enjoyed a summer home in Belgrade Lakes, Maine. Crater's ambitions, however, weren't strictly financial, and the young attorney made quite a name for himself in politics. In April 1930, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, then the governor of New York, appointed Crater to the New York Supreme Court. While the Great Depression was strangling much of the nation, Crater was earning $25,000 a year, more than $375,000 in 2021 dollars.
Worth mentioning too, by the way, the apartment he bought on Fifth Avenue, which is prime time.
Yeah.
He bought that as a gift for his, I guess, wife at that point.
I'm excited for this guy to go missing. I don't like him.
On August 2nd, 1930, only a few months after his appointment to the state Supreme Court, Crater and his wife arrived at their Maine vacation home. There, Crater took several phone calls that Stella said angered him. Crater had to return to New York City for business the next day, but he told his wife he'd be back in Maine by August 9th, her birthday. Crater spent the night of August 4th at the Fifth Avenue apartment and informed the maid he'd be heading back to Maine on the 7th. Crater went to his office on August 5th and again on August 6th. At one point on the 6th, he sent his secretary to the bank to withdraw $5,150, the equivalent of more than $80,000 today.
$80,000 any day of the week. That's a lot of money to walk.
It's hard to say because rich scumbags operate differently. Maybe he's gonna go buy a yacht in cash.
Yeah,
Who knows?
or 50,000 hot dogs.
Yeah.
Those come right about $1.50.
I don't know. I don't know hot dog math.
You could have fooled me.
Thank you. I think. Right?
No. It's suspicious, nonetheless. He's obviously up to maybe something not great.
The judge later returned to his apartment and dismissed the maid, telling her he was going swimming. Stella would later find this detail odd, as Crater reportedly did not enjoy swimming.
Now, what do you think of that, by the way? I always think this is funny when these cases happen. There's usually something where there's a detail and people will be like, hey, that person never liked I Love Lucy. It's weird that they were watching I Love Lucy.
Yeah.
You don't know everything about your partner's life.
I mean, but admittedly, it is weird to be like, go away, I want to swim.
But you do that all the time.
I don't do that.
You love pools.
I love pools, but I want people to be there with me. If I was this guy, I'd be like, Beverly, I'm thinking of taking a dip. How about you hop in with me?
Jesus Christ.
That evening, Crater visited his friend and ticket broker, Joseph Gansky, who arranged for Crater to attend the Broadway show Dancing Partner. Despite the fact that the show had only opened the previous night, some reports claim the judge had actually already seen it. In either event, Crater then made his way on foot to Billy Haas Chop House in the theater district on West 45th Street. There, Crater dined with attorney William Klein and showgirl Sally Lou Ritz. Around 9:15 p.m., the trio left the restaurant. Crater reportedly got in a taxi, presumably to get to Dancing Partner, and was never seen again.
So he's gone.
He's gone. He's missing.
Out of here.
He's gone. I could take solace in the fact that maybe he didn't get to the show, maybe, but my guy did have a delicious steak.
That's true.
At Billy,
that's something.
I don't know this place, Billy Haas's Chop House.
That sounds like a good place to have a fat ass steak.
Exactly. I'm telling you that I would enjoy it. Right now, without even seeing the menu, I'm going in there, I'm ordering the ribeye. I'm telling them, give me the biggest slab of meat that you can possibly fit on a plate.
Oh, shit. I'm actually...
Immediately.
Even if he didn't make it to the show, going and getting a big-ass steak. Okay, right? Then after dinner, you have like a cocktail or two.
Holy shit,
Is there anything better in the world than having a few cocktails, then having a dinner, then maybe a nice cup of coffee afterwards to settle the stomach, which I don't think it does.
I don't think it does. Yeah, I was about to say.
You're nice and full, you're a little loopy.
Yeah.
That's the time to disappear yourself.
That's true.
Take me out.
Full and tipsy, that's how I want to go out.
Yeah.
Though Judge Crater was last seen on August 6th, it wasn't until weeks later that people began to worry about the missing man. When her husband didn't show up in Maine on August 7th, Stella sent the chauffeur to New York to look for him. In the city, the maid told the chauffeur that the judge was bound to show up sooner or later, and that he'd make his way to Maine when he did. Meanwhile, the days ticked away. Stella assumed Crater was working, while his colleagues assumed he was in Maine with Stella.
This would be a very boring episode of The Last 48, which you know is when someone goes missing, that chronicles the 48 hours after they're pronounced missing. His would just be Stella smoking a cigarette in the house.
Yeah, drinking a martini in Maine.
His business partner's going, hey, 2 days off.
Yeah, dilly dilly.
Meanwhile, he's just floating face down in a pool.
At the same time, however, should be noted that it's pretty hard to jump to the conclusion that a person you know and love has vanished.
Especially when this guy seems to be a force of nature.
Yeah. If you haven't heard from someone in a couple days, you're not like, oh, they must be gone forever. They must have been wiped off the face of the earth.
That's true. Fair.
Eventually, someone realized Crater was missing. On September 3rd, almost a month after he was last seen, Crater's disappearance was announced to the public. The next day, a missing persons report was filed with the NYPD, and his vanishing became a nationwide story. When someone didn't show up for something, people would say they, quote, pulled a Crater, end quote.
Now here we're getting into the point where obviously people are having a little bit of fun with this.
Well, that's all you could do. Someone goes missing, you have a little fun with it.
Yeah. What would be the equivalent of pulling a Shane? You know?
Maybe like taking a nap in the shower.
That, or being a D-bag.
You've gone for a more cutting route.
Having trouble fitting through doors.
What would Bergara be? Sort of shitting your pants in Thailand?
It was Singapore.
Oh, sorry.
And maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Dead bodies found in hotel rooms were checked by police for resemblance to Crater. Nearly 100 witnesses were called in a grand jury inquiry regarding his disappearance. In January 1931, the grand jury reached the only conclusion they could. They had no idea what happened to the judge.
It never occurred to me how many bodies they find in hotel rooms.
I'm sure a lot.
I always thought it'd be fun to work at a hotel, and I do stand by that. But I think it would be sort of a bummer to, find dead bodies all the time.
Be a maid, walk into a room to clean it, expecting maybe this person left me a tip.
Yeah.
Well, that's a dead guy.
Hey, what stinks? Oh, another one.
Yeah.
Is it the famed vanished millionaire? No.
With Joseph Crater missing and a grand jury unable to come up with any conclusions, it's time for us to judge some theories. Our first theory is that Crater ran away from his life to start a new one. Crater was well connected in the world of New York Democratic politics during a time when such ties could have been a liability. In particular, investigations into political corruption in the city were heating up, especially surrounding Tammany Hall, the notorious political organization that first became synonymous with corruption in the 19th century due to its use of boss rule. Some think Crater may have fled to avoid testifying against those who helped him throughout his career. Some also suggest Crater may have been buying and selling judgeships, perhaps even his own, on the New York Supreme Court. This claim was even made publicly by a Republican candidate for governor. If such accusations were true, and the judge feared investigation surrounding Tammany Hall would expose him, then perhaps Crater decided to run instead of defend himself. Crater may have also fled his old life to start a new one with a mistress. The investigation into his disappearance turned up a rotation of beautiful girls he'd regularly socialize with, and he was known to have a fondness for showgirls. Crater's appetite for dancing and reputation as an enthusiastic womanizer led to the nickname of Good Time Joe.
Now that's a good name. I loved that he had an appetite for dancing.
I think he had an appetite for other things as well.
Sex with strange women.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say steak.
Oh, steak
and
as well.
Sex with weird women.
Yes, yeah.
Furthering this theory, in the years after his disappearance, there was no shortage of alleged sightings of the judge. In 1936, a gold prospector named Lucky Blackiette went to the LAPD to report having met Crater near the gold rush town of Julian, California. According to Lucky, the man admitted to being the missing Supreme Court judge and said, quote, "In one more year, I will be legally dead. I hope I can stick it out that long," end quote. Lucky's tip was actually supported by another report received by the LAPD's Missing Persons Bureau 5 years prior of a sighting just 60 miles from Julian. local authorities, along with New York detectives, began a search. In their investigation, police spoke with multiple people who recognized Crater's photo. One storekeeper remembered the man buying $5 worth of food, while another person said the man in the picture seemed to be well educated, but sucked at mining. Needless to say, Crater was not found.
Our leading story tonight, Joseph F. Crater, still missing. Now, for a lead in the case, we go to Julian, California to talk to a prospector.
Yeah, I seen him. I seen him out there in the hills. I was out there panning in the creek, and I seen a millionaire.
Perhaps the biggest piece of evidence supporting the idea that Crater intentionally abandoned his old life was the large amount of money withdrawn from the bank on the day of his disappearance. It was later reported, however, that Stella found the money he'd withdrawn, meaning if he'd actually started a new life, he did so without the $5,150.
I buy him giving it all up.
I don't. I just don't.
Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was like, oh,
yeah,
boy.
we all know the best thing to do when you're tired is go, why don't I spend 24 hours in a mine? My back sure hurts. Maybe swinging this pickaxe will wake me.
No, I'm not talking about tired physically. I mean tired.
Mentally tired,
the
yes.
glitz and glamour. He's, you know, he's living this fly by the seat of his pants life with all these show gals, and he's keeping up appearances with his wife, who he clearly doesn't give a shit about.
Could you imagine? Though, like, he doesn't actually change his, like, wardrobe. He's just out there in a $3,000 suit, kneeled down by a river, panning, just carrying the
He's got a top hat and tails, spats on.
Just completely cracked. Just lost his mind.
A man in an opera cloak. Yeah. Excuse me, I'm here to pan for gold.
I hope we find a skeleton somewhere in a suit.
Now, where is the gold? I have my pan. I'm ready to scoop it up.
Story by an author who was writing a book on the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's this lady, she had an early draft of a book that says what I'm saying is true. Don't know where the book is, though.
I'm not going to knock the guy for taking a cab for instead of a 10-minute walk, because if you just stuffed yourself with a fat-ass steak.
No, yeah, you got to walk that bad boy off. Otherwise, that thing is just...
Oh, no, I'm saying get in the cab. I'm not walking anywhere. Wheel me to my next destination.
Oh, no, you got to walk that off.
Sit me down at the show.
You can't have that slab of meat just sitting in your stomach, wreaking havoc on your insides.
That's what I want.
You got to walk it off.
No, disagree.
No,
we disagree on this.
You want to sit...
He's a millionaire. You put him in a cab, he wants to take a cab.
Yeah,
you think he wants to walk his ass down the street?
Yeah, millionaires poop too. You think you want to sit through a 2-hour play with a turd rocket working its way through your intestines?
I just think after a big dinner, nice to go for a little car ride.
And I think it's nice to go for a little stroll.
Well, I guess this one will remain unsolved then.
Our last theory is that Judge Crater was murdered. According to NYPD historian John Podracki, this is the semi-official consensus. Some posit that far from being afraid to testify about Tammany Hall, Crater was prepared to expose the corruption, and that the mob silenced him before he had the opportunity. At the time of her husband's disappearance, and reasserted in an interview 25 years later, Stella Crater believed the judge had been kidnapped and murdered. Stella's quoted as saying, quote, "Joe Crater would not run away from anything or anybody," end quote.
Disagree. think if his life was on the line, he'd probably run away.
Or he wouldn't, and they'd shoot him.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
right.
actually like high praise coming from your wife too. Like I imagine that if you got killed, I don't think a quote saying Shane Madej wouldn't run from anybody or anyone.
I'll run from anybody.
Exactly. That's the quote that would come out.
I'm a coward, man. You know, people generally point out the fact that I'm not afraid of ghosts, but that's because I don't believe in them.
That's true. He does believe.
If I believed in ghosts, I would run out of every building we've ever been in. I'm a scaredy cat.
And I stay in them.
Yeah, he does. Brave little boy.
I do. I stay in that hot water.
Yeah.
Make it my personal hot tub.
Anyway.
And I sit there and I relax like this.
You don't relax.
And I go fucking.
You breathe real fast, and you look like you're gonna pass
Someone
out.
get me a brewski, because I'm making this place my home.
Never do that.
Some claim that one of his mistresses could have had a boyfriend with ties to the mob, or that Crater was being blackmailed by a showgirl who had her boyfriend kill the judge. The grand jury into his disappearance brought up some possible connections to nefarious dealings, but as noted before, none of these links were strong enough to conclude anything. In 2005, 75 years after Crater went missing, Stella Ferrucci Good of Belrose, Queens, no relation to Stella Crater, died at the age of 91. In her safety deposit box, her family found an envelope that read, "Do not open until my death."
Cool.
Where do you think we're going with this?
I don't know, and so I am thrilled.
I love this. This thread comes up often in these cases. There's usually an envelope that says, "Do not open until my death." I'm also going to do this myself, and it is going to contain the dumbest things ever put on paper inside.
Is it going to be that drawing of you with 3 butt cheeks?
Yeah.
Inside were notes that claimed Ferrucci Good's husband, Robert Good, who had died in 1975, knew what had happened to Judge Crater. The note said that over drinks with her husband one night, taxi driver Frank Burns claimed to have been driving the cab Crater got into after dinner. Burns reportedly drove a few blocks before 2 accomplices jumped into the car with him. The taxi driver took the judge to Coney Island, where Crater was murdered and buried under the boardwalk. While no motivation was given in the notes, a specific location was. By the time the letter was discovered, however, the New York Aquarium had been constructed over that section of the boardwalk.
I'm not buying it. That's cartoonish. That's too cartoonish. It's too fanciful. Buried underneath the aquarium at Coney Island. Get out of here.
I do love the idea of a treasure map that leads to an old man's bones.
Yeah, this is some Goonie ass shit. I don't want this Goonie shit.
You thought you were gonna find treasure? Here's a skeleton.
Yeah, that's no fun. I'm not buying it. You know, I got a sense for these things. And this one ain't passing the sniff
Well,
test.
you just farted. That's all that happened.
Oh, beefy.
It said that until her death, every year on August 6th, Stella Crater would visit a bar in Greenwich Village in New York City and order 2 drinks. Before downing one of the drinks, Stella would reportedly toast to her missing husband, saying, quote, "Good luck, Joe, wherever you are," end quote. Then leave the other drink at the bar.
Still can't forgive her for leaving a little smoke wagon there on the bar. You know what I'm
That's
talking
a crime.
Yeah, leaving
That's an absolute crime.
a full glass of whiskey.
If I were sitting next to her and she was like, "This one's for my missing husband. Good luck wherever you are." She collected her things, teary-eyed, and left. I'd be like,
yeah, exactly.
I'd wait for that bell in the door. I'd be like,
yeah, the second it's there. Then you smash the glass on the ground like Thor.
Wealthy, powerful, and well-connected, Judge Crater was poised to be an influential figure in New York for years. Despite his high profile and decades of sleuthing, there's still almost nothing outside of pure speculation surrounding the fate of, quote, "the most missingest man in America." Meaning, whatever happened to Judge Joseph Force Crater that early August remains unsolved.
it could have been any one of these things because he himself put him in the situation where any number of these things seem possible.
As I've said before, if you want to dance with the devil, you got to live with it when he sets you on fire. And that's just basics of deviling right there.
Yeah, I always thought that could have been delivered cleaner, but I don't know how.
I think Good Time Joe got murdered. That's what I think.
Well, I guess we'll never know what happened to that funny, funny judge.
Yeah. Dismissed.